Tristan felt quite a bit of pressure as he finally exchanged words with the renowned patriarch of the Larkinson clan. The Vess, who he met in the past, presented himself in a completely different manner today. It started with his appearance. While the Vess in the past not only looked and behaved in a casual manner, the Vess in the ceremonial meeting room stood as if he owned the very air that Tristan breathed. The ornate caped uniform, along with the confidence built from achieving incredible successes in multiple domains, had transformed Vess into a leader that exuded the demeanor of an actual head of state. The tone and words adopted by Vess further cemented his dominant position. This was a man that did not forgive past grievances and always maintained his hostility towards the Friday Coalition. Even Lucky gave him a sense of pressure. The mechanical cat looked as if he was lounging casually in the same room, but the Friday men had collected enough intelligence about the cat to know that it was quite formidable in battle. Tristan needed to respond carefully in order to maintain the hope of holding a fruitful conversation with the resentful patriarch. "What is done, he said carefully. "We cannot undo the mistakes of the past. The only way we can proceed is to look towards the future and make sure that neither of us will continue to make more people suffer regardless of the side that they are on. Let's bury the hatchet. We barely have anything to do with each other anyway. We should agree to keep our weapons cool if we ever bump into each other again. We would also like you to use your influence among the Hexer colonists to ease up on their animosity. If they no longer make use of your Mechs to attack our settlements, we can all live in harmony so that we can focus on the other threats of the Red Ocean. Don't you want to provide a safer and more carefree life for your children?" Vess erupted in laughter. "Ha ha ha ha, what a joke. Is this the sincerity of the Friday Coalition? Do you think it is so easy to forgive all of the Larkinsons that you have killed during the Battle of Reckoning? If I was in a weaker position, I might be open to your offer, but since this is not the case, I am not inclined to lighten my stance at all. The Friday Coalition is still on my list of targets, and my children will most definitely inherit my hatred. Their mother will make sure of it, I think." The obstinacy shown by Vess made it clear to Tristan that he could not continue to rely on aspirational words to make any meaningful progress. He needed to show a more concrete willingness to achieve reconciliation. The Fridayman raised his palm. "Please hear me out, Patriarch. Our state is willing to make significant reparations to earn your forgiveness." "What sort of reparations are you talking about?" "For one, we are ready to transfer back a significant amount of shares in your living Mech Corporation." Tristan had started with the biggest and most profound concession that he was allowed to present. He knew that he needed to start this off on a firmer footing in order to maintain the interest of his counterpart. Though Vess already expected the Fridayman to put the shares under discussion, he did not expect that Tristan would be that straightforward. "How much?" 12%, Tristan responded. That was a lot. With the continued rise of the living Mech Corporation, the value of owning 12% of a booming Mech company that was based in the Red Ocean had skyrocketed to an amazing height. Any sane investor would never be willing to give up so many shares without obtaining a massive prize in return. It appeared that the Friday Coalition regarded Vess as such an enormous threat to their interests that the state would rather give up a whopping 12% of the outstanding shares of the LMC. If I recall correctly, that does not encompass all of the shares held by the Friday Coalition. You still owe me 4%. "I have already quoted our bottom line to you," Tristan replied. "Your former master has generously agreed to put up most of the shares that are in her name, leaving her with 2%, which we view as a guarantee for our new and more productive relationship with you. Master Talkwoman Huron has not agreed to put his own 2% stake in the LMC at our disposal. He has already conveyed his desire to continue to hold onto his shares." That was a weird message if Vess didn't know better. He had already been briefed about the internal divisions within the Friday Coalition. Master Carmen Olsen belonged to the Vermeer Group, which was much more eager to reconcile with Vess. Master Talkwomen Huron belonged to the Gage dynasty, which actually had a vested interest in the current status quo. Vess slowly frowned. I don't care about guarantees and continued relationships. The shares don't really belong to those masters and your state to begin with. You guys stole the ownership stakes from the Bright Republic. Either you surrender your stolen goods, or else I will put an end to this discussion. Don't be in such a hurry to close the door to further talks. My state is also willing to revoke the ban on selling your products in our markets. As long as we sign a new agreement, the Friday Coalition will not only lift this ban, but actively encourage our customers, particularly those who reside in our colonies, to purchase your mechs. There are many groups that have been waiting to purchase the pacifiers, the hymenopteras, and the other popular models that have won over many fans over the years. This concession did not impress Vess in the slightest. I don't care, he flatly said. It makes no difference for me whether I can sell my products to your Friday men or not. Most of my products are exclusive to the Red Ocean, so being able to service the needs of an entire star sector in the old galaxy is not that relevant. As for opening up my mechs for sale to your colonies, that sounds even less attractive to me considering I have serviced many larger customers. The Friday Coalition is willing to give your mech company privileged access to our mech markets in the Red Ocean. This might not sound like much at the moment, but you will be able to sell a lot more mechs in our colonial state once it has reached a much more impressive scale in the future. On top of that, we are even willing to talk with you about commissioning specialized mechs from you in order to enrich our military forces. Now that was a peculiar concession. I have armed and empowered the Hex army for years, Vess said as he raised his eyebrow. Why would you entrust me with doing the same for your troops? Why not? Although our relationship is not the best, we have seen how much you have managed to strengthen the Hexers and prolong their participation in the Komodo War. We genuinely respect and appreciate your living mechs. We shouldn't have banned them in our space at all. As long as we can start over with a clean slate, we have no objection to allowing you to do the same for our armed forces. Vess did not believe that the Friday Men veterans who had fought against so many Valkyrie Redeemers and other living mechs were willing to see this happen. Of course, the leaders of the Friday Coalition would force the decision onto them anyway. As long as their interests got ahead, who cared about offending their own troops? I am not enthused about designing mechs for you Friday men at all. Vess shook his head. No matter how interesting the projects can be, and no matter how much money I can earn from this deal, you can't bribe away the harm that you have done to me and my clan. We have our principles, and one of them is that we abide by our friendships and remember our enemies. The talks continued even though Tristan did not have much else to give. He was not a professional negotiator, so he did not handle this increasingly more awkward situation in the best possible manner. Vess eventually received a message from Minister Sheddarin Purnis that it was best to end this session at this time. Stop, he said as he raised his palm. Nothing you have said earlier is enough. While I admit that your state has put up numerous attractive concessions, they are not enough for me to feel moved. I suggest you go back and tell your bosses to be serious. I don't want to hear any further jokes from you. If you cannot give me a serious offer, then I will continue on my day while enthusiastic Hexer raiders continue to degrade your colonial ambitions. The first session had clearly come to an end. Tristan had failed to attain the breakthrough that he had been tasked with securing. At this point, Tristan should be saying his goodbyes. Instead, he lingered and opened up a different line of discussion. I knew you wouldn't let go of your hatred of us so easily, Tristan sighed. Since this is your stance, I'm allowed to present an alternative offer to you that is smaller but perhaps more attractive to you. I seriously urge you to hear me out before you pass any judgment. Vess narrowed his eyes in suspicion. Are you speaking on behalf of the Friday Coalition as a whole at the moment, or are you only representing a part of your great and victorious state? The Fridayman Mech designer shrugged. I guess you know about that already. My advisor did tell me that your clan is pretty good at figuring out this kind of stuff. I won't dance around the truth, then. Your remark is correct. I have already done my duty as a representative of the coalition. I am now speaking as an unofficial envoy of Vermeer Group, Carnegie Group, the Vanguard Group, and the Puffer clan. My two favorite coalition partners, along with two other losers from the Friday Coalition. What a surprise. Since you know about our state's internal contradictions, I don't think I need to explain why the coalition partners that I represent at the moment are not that pleased with the Gage dynasty and the Kansu clan. Leaving aside the latter, it is the Gaugers that are truly presenting a threat to the continuation of the Friday Coalition. Vess crossed his arms. All of that sounds interesting and all, but what does that have to do with me? I have no interest in fixing the problems that plague your state. I am not asking that of you, Patriarch. I am not asking you to bury the hatchet or persuade the Hexers to cease their raids on our colonies. In fact, I was about to request you do the opposite. We want to invite you to attack certain colonies that belong to a certain coalition partner that has been annoying the rest of us lately. Now that was a surprising development. Vess never expected that Tristan would blatantly request Vess and the Hexers to launch an open attack on the colonies of the Gage dynasty. That sounds crazy. As inviting as your offer sounds, we're not stupid, Mr. Wesseling. How will I be able to know that your suggestion isn't a trap? It would be too easy to hide a lot of forces at a Gauger colony and spring the trap once an attacking force has arrived. Tristan Wesseling did not answer immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath before pulling out a large but flexible information sheet from his white dress uniform and offering it up to the Larkinson Patriarch. Vess did not sense much of a threat from this printed sheet, so he grabbed it and quickly scanned the contents. His eyes widened. These are detailed defensive plans of several major Gauger settlements. The sheet contained a surprising amount of details. They not only showed a complete map of all of the defensive turrets, fortifications, and bases of numerous key settlements, but also mentioned the amount and models of Mechs tasked with defending the colonies. Not only that, the sheet also showed a hint of the designs of the prevailing Mech models of the Sundered Phalanx. The document explicitly mentioned their weaknesses, as well as how to best exploit them all, as if its creator was afraid that the Larkinsons couldn't figure this out themselves. If that wasn't shocking enough, the extremely information-dense sheet also contained the full designs of most, if not all, of the expert Mechs that were assigned to the defensive garrisons. The full details of their expert pilots were also mentioned. This critical sheet pretty much exposed almost all of the defensive layouts of the most prominent Gauger strongholds in the Magyar Middle Zone. Anyone who made use of this information could launch an extremely effective attack on the most critical and most strategic assets of the Gage dynasty in the Red Ocean. Vess' expression grew a lot graver after taking in this information. What is the meaning of this, Tristan? It's exactly what it looks like. Vess, we want you to pass this on to the Hexer colonists and encourage them to redirect their firepower towards the Gauger settlements that we have exposed with this leak. We are inviting, no, begging your Hexer friends to ruin the Gage dynasty's day. I can unequivocally promise that no forces hailing from the Vermeer Group, the Carnegie Group, the Vanguard Group, and the Puffer clan will ever move to come to the aid of the Gaugers. They are completely on their own as far as we are concerned. Vess was truly aback at this point, but Minister Shedderin, who had been listening in the background, remained sharp. The old man urgently gave the Patriarch a recommendation. We will need time to verify the authenticity of this generous package of information that you have given to us, Vess eventually said as he carefully rolled up the flexible sheet. We will require a bit of time before we are ready to hold another round of talks. That is understandable. Tristan politely nodded as if he hadn't stabbed the Gaugers in the back. Let me warn you that we have still withheld a certain amount of information. In addition, the content on the sheet that you are holding will become increasingly out of date as time passes by. While we have sources that can continue to supply you with information about ongoing developments, we are only willing to do so if you and the Hexers have agreed to act. Understood. Please wait until we call you up again. Vess never expected his first meeting with Tristan Wesseling in years to end this way. He could not even catch up with Tristan on a personal basis. The critical defense information that the Friedman Mech designer had nonchalantly leaked to one of the known enemies of his state demanded too much attention. The hard copy that fell into Vess' hands turned into a priority matter that needed to be dealt with as soon as possible. After waving Tristan goodbye, Vess immediately left the Ascension Gallery and headed down to the underground base complex, where he could securely handle the hot intelligence that he carried on his person. Please verify the information printed on this sheet, Vess said as he carefully handed over the item in question to a Black Cat officer. Make sure to be careful with dissemination of what is inside. Also, notify Director Calabast right away. I need her here in order to deal with the intelligence that we have received in the most prudent and respectful manner possible. I am about to call for a meeting with the highest leaders of the Golden Skull Alliance, and I do not want us to make decisions based on lies and misdirection. After tasking the Black Cats with verifying the sensitive information package, Vess proceeded to inform numerous people whose input he valued. People such as General Verl, Commander Kaesela Ingvar, Chief Minister Novelin Perness, and Chief Minister Magdalena Larkinson all received a call from him that caused them to put down their current duties in order to address this new surprise. One of the more interesting personalities he tapped was Chief Minister Abigail Evern. After Raymond Billingsley Larkinson finally retired from the second highest position of the Larkinson clan, Vess had thought a lot about who he should replace him with. His sights eventually fell on a candidate that he had passed over the last time, the former Commodore of the Penitent Sisters. Abigail Evern's appointment did not come without controversy. Her name not only betrayed her origin as a scion of the infamous Evern matriarchal dynasty, she also came from the military wing of the Larkinson clan. In the past, the three chief ministers each came from the military wing, the government wing, and the business wing of the clan. This ensured that every major pillar of the Larkinsons had a representative at the highest level. This pattern became invalid after Vess decided to replace Raymond Billingsley Larkinson with Abigail Evern. Although it sounded as if the business wing of the clan was being marginalized, Vess did not see it that way. The chief ministers aren't supposed to stay in their own lanes. Their background and work experiences may be useful in handling specific affairs, but they are meant to serve every part of the clan. Though the unrest of this appointment had been considerable at first, the controversy subsided as the Larkinson clan still ran as smoothly as ever. There were plenty of executives that were more than competent enough to address many kinds of issues. The chief ministers were mostly needed to make high-level policy decisions in order to make sure that the Larkinson clan developed in the right direction. Abigail Evern also turned out to be a more qualified leader than Raymond. This was due to the vast disparity of their backgrounds. Whereas Raymond used to be a third-rater, Abigail had received plenty of leadership and management training, as she grew up in one of the 6 most powerful dynasties of the Hexadric hegemony. What was also helpful was that Abigail's former naval career granted her the insight and motivation to improve the Larkinson clan's starship situation. The Larkinson Navy, which previously existed more in name than anything, received a lot more funding and manpower, allowing the clan to turn it into a real and formidable institution. The new chief minister put a lot of emphasis on upgrading and overhauling the starships of the new clan navy. Every ship needed to be beefed up in order to withstand more attacks, particularly those launched by large-caliber weapons mounted by alien warships. All in all, Vess was glad that he had made this appointment. Chief Minister Abigail Evern might not pay as much attention to the business activities of the clan, but the other 2 chief ministers were more than capable of picking up the slack. since the Golden Skull Alliance was preparing to undertake a multi-year expedition through the more dangerous reaches of the Red Ocean. It was much more important for the Larkinson clan to bring its military affairs into order. Who cared about the efficiency of the living Mech Corporation's production operations when dozens of alien warships were bearing down on the expeditionary fleet? In any case, the appointment of a new chief minister inevitably meant that an old one had to move aside. Just as Raymond Billingsley Larkinson thought that he could enjoy a leisurely retirement as an ordinary clansman in Davut, Vess had approached him with an interesting proposition one day. "I want you to become the director of our new branch on Davut Roman 7, Vess straightforwardly said. "While our central administration is in charge of most of its affairs right now, this cannot go on forever. Once we set off our Trailblazer expedition, this branch has to be able to stand up on its own. I need Larkinson in charge, who I can trust to keep my interests at heart, while at the same time command respect from every clansman." Raymond frowned. "There are many Larkinsons that can do this job. I am old, Vess. I have already reached the twilight of my life. Not only that, the clan has grown way too quickly for me to keep up. I was already struggling to keep on top of all of the complicated developments of the clan. I don't think I can lead the branch, not when I have been looking to put down my work and leave everything to the younger generation, who are more eager to make their mark." Though Raymond made his yearning for retirement clear, Vess was not willing to let him off that easily. As the grandfather of an expert pilot and one of the few true-blood Larkinsons who grew up under the ideals of the old family, there were few people that Vess trusted more to lead the Davut branch in a good direction. "Don't be in such a hurry to refuse, Raymond. I need you in charge of the branch. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to deal with the specific affairs. You can just delegate all of the work but maintain the final say over everything. What is important is that I need you to ensure that the Davut branch will never go astray once our main fleet goes away. It is all too common for distant branches to become estranged from their mother organizations, so I need a man who has been a Larkinson longer than almost anyone else to occupy the top position and remind everyone of our values." Though Raymond was mentally and physically tired, Vess appealed so much to his sense of duty that the old man began to reconsider. Still, he didn't think it would be much use, considering his advanced age. "You should look for someone younger, Vess. My health is already declining, and the doctors do not think I can live much longer. I won't be able to lead your branch for long before I have to make way for a replacement." "That won't happen," Vess stated. "It won't." "Yes, I've already scheduled an appointment with the MTA about your upcoming life-prolonging treatment session. Congratulations, Raymond. You get to live 100 years longer." "What?" Raymond looked shocked. "Do you know how much that costs us? You could spend your MTA merits on much more useful endeavors. My life isn't worth that much sacrifice." Vess shook his head. "Your family, Raymond. Our clan is growing bigger by the day, but the amount of people who can trace their line back to the old family is continuing to shrink as a result. I don't mind playing favorites in order to keep you around for a longer time. I've already paid the merits from my personal account. Don't worry, the cost is still bearable to me. The first round of life-prolonging treatment is always the easiest, and I have opted for a cheaper package as well. There is a small risk that the operation will get botched, but hey, your lifespan is already short, so hardly anything will change." Fortunately for the both of them, the life-prolonging treatment proceeded smoothly. Vess actually bet that due to his good relationship with the MTA, the doctors and specialists working for the organization would direct more care and attention to Raymond's operation. Whether this was true or not, Vess managed to save millions of MTA merits and still get what he wanted. Raymond's entire life changed after his successful rejuvenation. He caused a lot of people's heads to turn as he returned to the clan with a younger and smoother appearance. Vess could feel the vitality that the MTA had somehow stuffed inside Raymond's body, and most importantly, his spirit. This was a process that even Vess couldn't perform. The reaction from Venerable Tusa Billingsley Larkinson was especially appreciative. "Thank you for doing this, Vess," the expert pilot earnestly said. "You always say that family matters, but I didn't think you would put your money where your mouth is. Being able to spend another lifetime with my grandfather is a privilege that not many people get to enjoy." Vess smiled in return. "I originally founded the clan to give us exiles from the old family a new home and a way for us to get ahead. While all of the new and talented adopted clansmen have impressed me a lot, I haven't forgotten about the dreams and aspirations of our original gathering. I owe much to Raymond and other original Larkinsons for the successes that we have achieved throughout the years." Now that Raymond had become younger and full of life again, the rejuvenated man no longer had any desire to retire and let everyone else do all of the work. He eagerly assumed his position as the branch director and started to implement more high-level policies that would hopefully ensure the Davute branch would remain prosperous and orderly for many decades. Though Raymond had retreated from the main branch of the Larkinson clan after this move, Vess still decided to bring him in to discuss the intelligence that Tristan had leaked. If anything happened to the Gage dynasty's holdings in Magyar Middle Zone, the Gaugers would certainly be looking for vengeance. The Davute branch might get targeted as a consequence, so it was vital for Raymond to get involved. A busy day passed by before everyone involved decided to meet in the secure chamber underneath the cat nest. Numerous Larkinsons, as well as the highest delegates of the Glory Seekers, and the Cross clan converged to discuss the most explosive development of the Golden Skull Alliance in years. The expressions on the leaders who attended the meeting were mixed. A few faces showed concern. The risks and dangers associated with the leaked intelligence were considerable. Who knew whether it was all a trap? Others showed a sense of weariness. The Komodo War, as well as the Larkinson clan's entanglement with the Hexers, should have already ended as far as they were concerned. A handful showed eagerness, though. They relished the opportunity to hit back at the Friday men and set back the interests of the most powerful and domineering coalition partner. All of these people gathered together for a hasty meeting to discuss what the Golden Skull Alliance should do about the sensitive information package, as well as Tristan's less-than-proper invitation to attack one of his supposed allies. This is going to be troublesome, Vess predicted as he thought about all of the contentious decisions that they would have to make. He briefly thought about inviting his wife to this leadership meeting as well, but he concluded it was best for her to remain in the dark for the time being. Gloriana was far too biased and intense to make fruitful contributions to the discussion. Vess wanted to exchange opinions with grown adults, and he had a feeling that bringing along his spouse was counterproductive to this goal. "Oh well, I'll tell her what happened afterwards," he shrugged. Meow. While Lucky performed his duty and sniffed out any possible bugs and listening devices in the room, everyone else settled down in their seats. The presence of numerous strong individuals cast a strange air in the secure meeting chamber. Patriarch Reginald Cross had to sit a bit further away from the Larkinsons due to his strong and overpowering domain. Though the powerful ace pilot did his best to tighten his domain field in order to cause the least amount of disruption possible, it was impossible to remove his influence entirely. High-ranking Mech pilots were supreme warriors who were not accustomed to holding back. They were strong and had a constant need to make that clear to everyone. Sitting next to the patriarch of the booming Cross clan was its head designer. Master Benedict Cortez looked almost invisible as he sat next to the eye-catching ace pilot. That was deliberate on his part, as he did not particularly wish to attract attention. Few people could deny that he was weak or trivial, though. After he successfully realized his design philosophy by following up on the inspiration that he had gained during the fabrication of the Mars, he visited the MTA and disappeared for a few weeks, before returning as an officially certified master Mech designer. Compared to the rapid transformation of the leading figures of the Cross clan, the ones from the Glory Seekers hardly looked different than before. Marshal Ariadne, Wadden looked a bit older than before, but it was almost impossible to notice this, as Hexers tended to put a lot of effort into their appearances. Venerable Brutus exuded a calmer impression. Becoming a father had significantly changed his life. He did not even look that eager to act on the intelligence. After Vess swept his gaze across all of the people invited to the meeting, he finally kicked off the emergency meeting. He first picked up the original sheet of information and rolled it out so that it openly displayed its contents on the surface of the table. Everyone here is aware of why we have convened today, so let's skip all of the pleasantries and get on to business. I think the first question that most of us have is whether the information that we have obtained through an unusual channel is accurate. The circumstances of this leak is anything but normal, and we must ask serious questions whether the origin of this package can be trusted. Director Calabast, please present your findings. The spymaster stood up from her seat and waved her hand in order to activate a projection. Before we proceed with this discussion, it is helpful if I quickly summarize the overall situation of the colonies of the two major colonial groups in question. The projected image displayed a map of the Magyar Middle Zone. Hundreds of star systems belonging to both the Friday Men and the Hexers shone prominently on the map. Although the amount of colonies belonging to both sides looked impressive, many of them didn't actually amount to much. They were rather minor colonies that did not hold high expectations. They mostly existed to prevent others from settling near the Friday Men and Hexers, and to take care of future agricultural and industrial needs. The tentatively named Friday Colonies and Hex Federation both pursued similar strategies, where they invested most of their resources into building up a dozen or so core colonies. These colonies were each founded by the major groups and factions of their respective sides, and were much more heavily defended than the other settlements. While the advantages of this approach were clear, the downside was that there were a lot of colonies that were still stuck in a relatively rudimentary stage, even after years of development. The Friday colonies have done their best to bolster the defenses of their outlying settlements, but the weaker coalition partners are less capable of doing so. They have already been forced to abandon numerous expensive investments because the Hexers have undone years of work with their raids. Marshal Ariadne Wadden grinned with pride at this news. Anything that made the Friday Men feel bad was a cause for celebration to the Hexers. Calabast waved her hand again in order to zoom in on the territory of the Friday colonies. The map began to highlight the occupied star systems in different colors. It became clear that many of the Hexer raids tended to target the weakest and most vulnerable colonies, which was bad news for the weaker coalition partners, but largely spared the ones belonging to the Gage dynasty and the Khonsu clan. As you can see, the colonies founded by the Gaugers and Consus have rarely been struck by attacks. This is despite their higher investments and better development. Even their outlying colonies are better protected, which means that the cost of raiding them is considerably higher. The Hexers might have an enormous hatred for the Friday Men, but they weren't stupid. The ones that managed to get evacuated to the Red Ocean were often considered to be the brightest and most competent citizens of their former state. They would rather bully the weaklings and make off with less gains than to crash their precious Mechs into walls by targeting the better defended colonies. Calabast finally reached the more interesting part of her presentation. Now, the leaks that we have recently obtained from what we presume to be the weaker coalition partners largely concern 3 specific planets located in 3 different star systems. Each of them happens to be set up as the core colonies of the powerful Gage dynasty. She pointed towards the most important star system. The Pima Prime system is one of only several port systems of the Friday colonies, and its strategic value is inestimable. It is the crown jewel of the Gage dynasty's holdings in the Red Ocean and has received the greatest amount of investment. It is already being set up as the head of the Gauger colonies and may also become the capital of the entire colonial state if the current trend continues. It is conceivable that not every coalition partner would be pleased at this development. That was probably an understatement. The Gaugers were already powerful enough. If they were able to make it so that the Friday Coalition's colonies would center around the Pima Prime system, then there was no way to stop the Gage dynasty's rise. This alone made the leaks a lot more plausible. The Carnegie Group and the Vermeer Group urgently needed to stall the Gage dynasty's ambitions, and apparently weren't above resorting to dishonorable deeds. The Rote-Suma system is also an important holding of the Gage dynasty. Calabast pointed towards a second core colony. This star system might not be a port system, but it is one of the richest sites in terms of resources. It not only offers an abundance of low-grade exotics, but also contains plenty of confirmed deposits of medium-grade and even high-grade exotics. The Gaugers recognize the value of this star system and have invested heavily in it, so that Rote-Suma can serve as the industrial heart of the Friday colonies. Everyone recognized the importance of raw materials, and the Gage dynasty keenly understood the need to extract as much of them as possible. This was why the Gaugers invested a huge amount of resources, manpower and industrial machinery, to quickly put as many resource extraction and processing facilities online as possible. After years of priority investment, the efforts of the Gage dynasty finally started to pay off, as Rote-Suma constantly shipped many tons of industrial resources to the busy factories of Pima Prime and beyond. Calabast pointed towards a third star system. Compared to the previous two colonies, New Rams does not look important at first. It is most notable by how large it is and how many colonizable planets it contains. The abundance of available space, as well as the adequate availability of basic resources, has caused the Gage dynasty to designate it as a self-contained population center. It will probably hold the highest number of colonists out of any holding in the Friday colonies if nothing goes wrong. These were the three core colonies that the Gage dynasty had painstakingly built over the years. Each of them formed the nucleus of numerous more outlying colonies that would soon form a more cohesive and united power bloc. Each of the colonies were led by different influences that held all of the power in the dynasty, but Calabast did not feel it was necessary to explain this much. After she clarified the major holdings of the Gage dynasty, she finally addressed their defenses. As you all know, the plans that have fallen into our hands allegedly contain a large amount of critical information that corresponds to the three aforementioned colonies. I have consulted with our agents and informers that have either visited them on a temporary basis as traders and contractors, or have taken up permanent residence. Pretty much all of their findings and observations match up with the intelligence. The few minor discrepancies we have noticed can be chalked up to recent changes. Interesting, Vess softly spoke as he rubbed his smooth-shaven chin. He didn't even know that the Black Cats had managed to infiltrate the Friday colonies to such a degree. Calabast never found it important enough to mention this crucial little detail to him during their past meetings. There are many differences between these three core colonies, but I will quickly mention the most important of them. The Pima Prime system is treated as the colonial capital of the Gage dynasty and is the best defended of the three. The Rote-Suma is almost just as well defended because it has the highest concentration of capital assets in the Friday colonies. The New Rams system might not be as attractive as the other two, but the number of colonists who have settled there is the highest. Each of them played a key role in the colonial ambitions of the Gage dynasty. As long as one of them got attacked to the point where almost everything was razed, then the powerful coalition partners' plan to dominate the Friday colonies would most certainly have to be thrown in the garbage chute. Vess turned towards the Glory Seekers. Marshal Ariadne Wadden, I believe you managed to get in touch with the Hex Federation. What do the Hexers say about the contents of the information sheet? The leader of the Glory Seekers did not dare to issue any solid judgments. Not much time has passed for the Hexer intelligence agencies to verify all of the leaked intelligence. However, I can say that when they compare the details to the information that they already know, much of the claims add up. Our preliminary conclusion is that the leaks are accurate, though I should caution you that it will take time to be truly certain. I think that is the best answer that we can get for the time being. Vess nodded in understanding. Let us proceed with this meeting with the assumption that the sensitive information is fully accurate from the moment it was printed on this sheet. The questions I have is what the Hexers intend to do, and what our own role should be. Marshal Ariadne, have you heard any word about how the Hex Federation intends to proceed should its agents verify the intelligence? The woman frowned. I have not received any official word, so I cannot say anything for certain. However, based on my contact with the matriarchal dynasties as well as my own personal understanding of their goals and motivations, I think it is likely they will be tempted to act. The Friday colonies represent a significant thorn in the Hex Federation's side. Any chance of weakening their archenemy under favorable circumstances is worth pursuing. I have already received informal indications that the Hexers have already begun to lay the groundwork of a massive surprise assault. The conflict between the two colonial states was bound to heat up due to this development. The Hexers were so fixated on the Friday men that they simply couldn't resist the bait. What is the likelihood that this is all an elaborate ploy that is designed to entrap the Hexer raiders and eliminate them in one fell swoop? Chief Minister Novelin Pernus asked with great concern. Though not everyone appreciated the Larkinson clan's close relationship with the Hexers, the reality was that enjoying the backing of a strong colonial state could be incredibly useful in numerous situations. The Hex Federation was not only an exceptionally friendly and profitable market to the LMC, but could also serve as an escape route for the Larkinson clan. If the Larkinsons ever made too many enemies and got driven out of Davut, they could flee pursuit by traveling to distant places. However, if this was not a viable option, then Vess believed that he and his clan would always be able to take refuge within the Hex Federation. It would be a lot harder for pursuers to persist in their chase if they had to make enemies with an entire colonial state. This was why Vess held a decent amount of concern to the future rise and development of the Hex Federation. The stronger its colonies, the more advantages the Hexers conveyed to the Larkinsons. The last thing that anyone wanted to see was the Hexers becoming a lot more vulnerable due to suffering a massive military defeat. My words might be premature, but I have a high degree of confidence that we truly obtained a thorough glimpse of the defensive plans of the three key colonies. Calabast said in a confident tone. All of you should know about the Friday Coalition's increasing amount of internal contradictions. The Gage dynasty has shown increasingly less restraint as its relative power over the others have grown. The Carnages, the Vermeers, the Vanguards and the Puffers all have a strong and united interest in weakening the hand of the Gaugers. It would be best if the Gage dynasty is kicked out entirely from the Red Ocean. This way, the balance of power will no longer be as skewed as before. Several people nodded, but General Verl still maintained a skeptical expression. I can see how the weaker colonial partners may have a vested interest in putting down the Gage dynasty, but the Hexers are no friends of theirs. The Carnages and the Vermeers wish to put down the Hexers just as much as the Gaugers. It wouldn't surprise me if they have prepared an ambush that is intended to strike the Hexer attack force just as the first battle has already ended. It would allow the marginalized partners of the coalition to hit two birds with a single stone. Such a scheme sounded exactly what Vess would want to pull off. It was so efficient and got so much done that the weaker partners of the Friday Coalition should also be tempted. It is fairly easy to determine whether the weaker Friday men are preparing an ambush of their own. Marshal Ariadne Wadden spoke up. We are roughly aware of the existence and locations of most of their fleets and Mech forces. Each of the ones that are being tracked at this time are exclusively assigned to defensive missions. The Friday men have no leeway to launch offensive operations. They simply don't have the numbers to start any wild adventures. The Friday men, maybe hiding a secret fleet or two for just these occasions. The Marshal shook her head. That may be possible, but not enough to pose a threat. The Hexer intelligence agencies have been quite thorough in tracking down the Mechs and carriers that are at the disposal of their enemies. It will be easy to verify whether there are any secret fleets that are preparing to respond to any major Hexer incursions by keeping a close eye on adjacent star systems. I think that the parties behind Mr. Wesseling will also provide additional guarantees if the Hex Federation has shown a willingness to act on the leaked intelligence. Calabast provided her own opinion. In fact, the Hexers don't necessarily have to make a move. This incident is already a strong sign that the Friday Coalition has already begun to rot from within. The state will almost certainly be worse off if the Gage dynasty keeps fighting against its own partners. That was true, but maybe not. If the Gage dynasty and the Khonsu clan become the de facto rulers of the Friday colonies, then the colonial state might end up stronger in the end. As various people tried to figure out whether this was a trap, one of the people attending the meeting did not look at ease. Branch Director Raymond Billingsley Larkinson had listened quietly throughout these discussions, but became increasingly more disturbed by what he heard. He eventually raised his hand, which interrupted the current discussion. "Yes, Raymond. I have a question for you, Patriarch. Why are we holding this discussion in the first place? Shouldn't we hand over the leaked information to the Hex Federation and be done with it? I see no reason why we must talk so much when we have no obligation to do anything further. Tell us honestly, Vess. Have you decided to take part in a potential attack against one of the Gauger colonies?" Raymond asked an incredibly important question, and one that should have been asked a lot earlier. Everyone turned to Vess. Most of them looked curious, but others already knew his intentions. Vess slowly stood up from his seat in order to make his stance clear. "I have to admit that I have been considering the possibility that our forces will take active part in such a major raid. We have grown stronger than ever, and we can inflict serious damage to the sundered phalanx elements that have been transferred to the Red Ocean." "What? Why, Vess? Why take the risk? Why revisit old hatreds? Can't we just bury the hatchet and move on with our lives? What can we possibly gain out of participating in such a massive attack? If this is solely about acting upon your hatred and your grievances against the Friday men, then I cannot in good conscience support such an endeavor." Vess remained calm, even as Raymond vehemently expressed his desire to avoid any unnecessary conflict. "It is true that I don't like the Friday men. It is also true that I would love to grab any opportunity to undermine their interests. However, it's not just about me. I believe that participating in this operation will benefit all of us. Have you seen how much our Mech legions have grown as of late? Our Larkinson army has grown much stronger than before. Ordinary military forces can no longer compete against us anymore. The Fridayman troops are unable to acquire Mechs that are as expensive as ours. They are also incapable of matching our training results, especially once we started making use of the MSDS. I think it is dangerous for us to put too much stock in the advantages of the Larkinson army. You might be right, sir, but don't forget that we are merely a private organization, while the Gage dynasty has the resources of a massive state at its disposal. The Gaugers have numbers on their side. Our Hexers also have numbers on our side," Marshal Ariadne interjected. "If the Hex Federation, it will make certain to deploy more strength than what the Gaugers have at their disposal at our chosen attack target. If our Golden Skull Alliance is willing to pitch in, then we can increase our numerical disparity and crush the hostile forces with overwhelming might. Previously, launching a major assault on any of the 3 exposed core colonies was not viable," Marshal Ariadne stated. "The main reason for that is because the Hex Federation simply cannot anticipate how many defenses they will face. This is no longer the case after this massive exposure. We know almost exactly what the Gaugers have deployed in these star systems. We not only know their numbers and positioning, but also obtained critical blueprints as well as information that exposes the weaknesses of their combat assets. The Gauger colonies were completely exposed if the leaks were accurate, while the potential attackers were largely in the dark. The result of this was a massive intelligence gap that could heavily tilt any battle in the favor of the Hexers. Calabast nodded in agreement. The Marshal is correct. Good intelligence can mean the difference between victory and defeat. The exaggerated amount of information we have obtained not only allows our operatives to assassinate critical personnel and sabotage key defensive installations before we commence our major operation, but also employ targeted attacks throughout the battle that can easily take out core defensive assets with half difficulty as before. The overall message was clear. The Gauger colonies had become easy targets, so easy in fact that they were practically begging to get attacked. Raymond Billingsley Larkinson was not satisfied with what he had heard so far, though. I can understand why you wish to pounce on the vulnerability of those 3 major colonies, but I have yet to hear a justification why our clan in particular should go on the attack. Can you explain your full motivations, why you would even consider this in the first place? Vess sighed. He supposed he should be more forthcoming. Do you want to know the truth, Director Raymond? Because we can. That's it, sir. It's more than that, but this is the best way I can sum up my answer. Look, we're strong now. We are stronger than ever before. We have spent 5 long years building up our Larkinson Army and Larkinson Navy to prepare for the upcoming Trailblazer expedition. That also happens to put us in a great position to launch a major assault on one of these colonies. Besides, the Hexers have already promised us that we can earn a major share of the plunder that is proportional to our contributions. The more forces we commit, the greater the amount of goods, strategic materials, valuable salvage, and most importantly captured starships we can obtain. An assault against a well-defended human colony is different from plundering a poor alien planet. That is true, but my point still stands. To be honest, I really want to bloody our troops, many of whom have joined us only recently and have never fought in a serious battle against a competent military force. This is one of the few opportunities to target an enemy that we can predict and calculate based on all of the intelligence that we have obtained. I would rather test our Mech legions against a known enemy than against one of the many unknown alien forces that we may stumble upon in the future. Raymond couldn't believe what he was hearing. He always knew that Vess possessed aggressive tendencies, but this was something else. He glanced towards the Glory Seekers. It was not difficult to predict that they would fully support any attack on the Friday Men. Perhaps he might find relief by turning to the Cross clan instead. Patriarch Reginald Cross, where do you stand? Do you support an initiative to attack a major colony? I do. The powerful leader spoke for the first time since the meeting started. The Friday Men have the blood of many crossers on their hands. They deserve retribution, but we were too weak to do anything about in the past. That is no longer the case. With my strength, our assault will assuredly succeed. Not everyone expected the Cross Patriarch to have already made the decision to take part in a potential assault. Master Benedict Cortez did nothing to soften his patriarch's declaration. I concur with all of the reasons that everyone has mentioned here. The gains outweigh the costs. Our cumulative advantages are so great that the risks that should have caused us to reconsider are no longer a great concern. Too many of our crosser Mech pilots are still relatively green. It is best to let them fight against the enemies that we know well before we pit them into battle against enemies we know less about. The Gage dynasty is a suitable target. If even someone as smart and clever as Master Benedict was willing to support his impulsive friend, then the Cross clan was truly united behind this plan. Patriarch Reginald grinned as he stared at a particular star system. According to what we know, the Gage dynasty has stationed an ace pilot on Pima Prime. I am eager to test my mettle against a fellow saint. His ace Mech looks good, but mine is undoubtedly stronger. There is no way I will lose a duel against this worthy opponent. He shall be the first of many champions that I shall fell with my Mars." The battle-hungry ace pilot clearly made his motivations known. It sounded as if his sole motivation in going along with all of this was to secure a duel against a powerful and dangerous Gauger ace pilot. This was an exceedingly dangerous proposition. A single failure could cause the Cross clan to fall into ruin again. However, despite all of the ways that such a confrontation could go wrong, neither Patriarch Reginald nor Master Benedict showed any indications of retreat. The latter even started to rub his palms in anticipation. "Whatever you do, don't crush your opponent entirely. Save the skull if you can," the master grinned. "Don't forget about me," Vess reminded the two crossers. "I want to claim the ace pilot's spirit if he perishes." The Larkinsons and the crossers hadn't even discussed a plan for attack, but were already in the process of dividing the potential spoils. The Golden Skull Alliance wished to take part in a possible assault on a Fridayman colony. This was a shocking piece of news to numerous leaders who had not been a part of the original decision-making process. People like Branch Director Raymond Billingsley Larkinson found it difficult to understand why the Larkinson clan should even take part in such a risky venture, but Vess had made his voice clear. He understood quite well how controversial this decision might sound. Not many people signed up for the Larkinson clan with the intention of helping Vess pursue his vendetta against a powerful state-level entity. Even if the Friday Coalition was not that big of a factor in the Red Ocean, it still possessed much greater resources than many other pioneers. Although it was not quite fair for these Larkinsons to get caught up in a game that they never wanted to play, Vess was determined to go through with it. The opportunities were too great, and the profits he could earn from this bold action were immense. The secure meeting chamber turned turbulent for a while, as a small group of more risk-averse Larkinsons, such as Raymond Billingsley Larkinson and Chief Minister Novelin Pernus, openly voiced their doubts to the necessity of this action. "Every battle is inherently dangerous," Novelin Pernus stated. "There are no certainties on the battlefield. No matter how well we know the Friday men, there is always a chance that they have a surprise or two up their sleeves. The damage we can suffer may be far greater than we anticipated. Our capital ships may be put in danger as well, which would have calamitous consequences to the family who reside on them. Is it truly worthwhile for us to participate when it means that we have to put our friends and children under the crosshairs of the Friday men?" He raised an important point. Participating meant that the Golden Skull Alliance would have to deploy with its full expeditionary fleet, which included several non-combat vessels such as the Dragon's Den and Vivacious Wal. The Alliance could not leave them behind in Davut or in a hidden corner, because the valuable vessels would become way too vulnerable to attacks. The civilian vessels were safest if they accompanied the main fleet, which in effect meant that they would have to take part in the offensive operation as well. If the Larkinson clan was larger, stronger, and more established, then this measure wouldn't have been necessary. It was a pity that the clan was far from reaching this point. This was why the civilian side of the Larkinson clan did not support this course of action. Hundreds of thousands of non-combatants, many of which became Larkinsons only recently, would get a rude reminder that their patriarch tended to drag his own people along wild and crazy adventures. "General Verl, you are known to be a sensible leader. What do you think about the possibility of participating in a major assault?" Raymond Billingsley Larkinson asked. "What is the stance of the Larkinson army? Are you truly supportive of launching an attack against a formidable and competent opponent that has hundreds of thousands of Mechs at its disposal?" The highest commanding officer of the Larkinson army did not give Raymond the answer he wanted to hear. "The attack is viable as long as the Hex Federation takes the lead in this assault," Verl stated his opinion. "It is not my place to determine whether we should fight alongside the Hexers in a possible operation against the Gage dynasty. I can merely observe that if the Hexers are at least willing to match the numbers of the Sundered Phalanx, the addition of up to 27,000 Mechs can prove to be a decisive factor in a possible attack." This is especially the case when we have obtained the support of an ace pilot in the form of Patriarch Reginald Cross. He and his Mars alone are worth at least an entire Mech division in terms of combat power. Normally, the defending side enjoyed a considerable advantage, but the intelligence gap was so immense due to the leaks that it was the Gaugers who were in trouble this time. Only a moderate numerical advantage should be enough to defeat the colonial defense forces outright, or at least conclude a devastating raid. If you are so eager to attack one of the important strongholds of the Gage dynasty in the Red Ocean, shouldn't we select a target where our assurances of victory are higher? Raymond asked in a skeptical tone. I cannot understand why you have decided to attack Pima Prime without much discussion. The colonial capital is not easy to reinforce due to the fact that it is a port system. The intelligence also makes it clear that it is guarded by an ace pilot and an ace Mech. Why must we challenge the most difficult colony when we can pick on considerably easier targets such as Rote Suma or New Rams? Novelin Purness nodded in agreement. From an infrastructural perspective, both Rote Suma and New Rams are almost just as valuable as Pima Prime. If the Hexers can break open Rote Suma, they can destroy all of the large, valuable, and difficult-to-replace mining machines and industrial processing plants. This will immediately shut down the bulk of the supply of raw materials to Pima Prime and New Rams, thereby crippling the Gauger colonial ambitions. Meanwhile, New Rams holds a majority of the Gaugers who have emigrated to the new frontier. Capturing them or neutralizing them will not only deal a severe morale blow to the coalition partner, but also set back the long-term growth of their colonies. The argument that Novelin Purness tried to make was that if Vess and the others were out to do as much damage to the Gage dynasty as possible, they could achieve the same magnitude of effects by attacking the softer colonies. There was no need for them to throw themselves headfirst into the defenses of Pima Prime, the crown jewel of the Gage dynasty. General Verl most certainly knew all of this, but his perspective on the matter was different from what the naysayers expected. I believe that there is additional merit to targeting Pima Prime over the other two colonies, he said. According to the leaked information as well as other sources of intelligence, the Gaugers have invested the most into fortifying their new port system. They have allocated less resources to the defenses of Rote Suma and New Rams, but is this truly the case? What do you mean by that, General? Put yourself in the place of a Gauger leader. If you think that the Hexers may eventually be willing to commit an assault on one of your core colonies, do you think those women will be crazy enough to attack Pima Prime or settle for the easier targets? You are relying too much on speculation and assumptions. General Verl smirked. Much of warfare is based on guesswork and assumptions. The difference is whether you know the enemy better than the enemy knows you. Think about how the Hexer raiders have behaved up until now. They have spent years harassing the outlying colonies of the weaker coalition partners in the Magyar Middle Zone. They have never deviated from this pattern, even though a lot of weaker colonial settlements have pretty much been hollowed out due to suffering repeated attacks. What does this tell you about the Hexers? That the Hexer raiders behave like bullies that pick on the weak but fear the strong. Exactly. According to this pattern, the likelihood that the Hexers would actually choose to attack the Gage dynasty is low. However, if this unlikely possibility ever comes true, then the Hexers will not stray too far from their previous pattern and opt to attack either Rote Suma or New Rams. Personally, I think the former is most likely because crippling the supply of raw materials will delay the development of the Friday colonies the most. I believe it is possible that the Gaugers may have deployed secret forces on those planets that might give us all an unwelcome surprise in battle. That sounds a bit out there, General. This is a plausible theory, Marshal Ariadne Wadden supplied. The Friday men like to be clever. They think us Hexers are easy to fool. This leak may even be a part of a deep, multi-layer ploy that is meant to weaken both us and the Gauger. Well, this ploy won't work because the Hex Federation agrees with the decision to target Pima Prime. Since it is already known that it is the most fortified star system in the Friday colonies, the Gaugers probably expect that we are deterred from ever launching an assault on it. The only way to fight against an ace mech is to bring another ace mech, but to do so, the Hex Federation would have to bring one of their own, thereby making one of their key colonies vulnerable to attack. That is unacceptable. Vess openly chuckled. That is what makes our participation so helpful. The assumptions of the Gaugers are correct as long as the Hexers can only launch an assault by themselves. The picture becomes a lot different once we get involved. Our willingness to bring forth an ace mech of our own makes it a lot more viable to target the Fridayman core colony that should be the least likely to get attacked. The Gaugers will not be psychologically prepared to fight an actual battle in Pima Prime, and the odds that they have prepared a hidden layer of defenses should be low as well. In other words, this was a big mind game. Since Pima Prime was so strategically important, the Gaugers fortified it the most. The idea was to make the prospect of attacking it so costly that the Hexers would be deterred from ever thinking about launching an attack. However, the Hex Federation, along with the Golden Skull Alliance, wanted to take advantage of this thinking pattern by acting exactly against the expectations of the Gage dynasty. If their gambit succeeded, then the Hexers as well as the Golden Skullers would not only win one of the largest and most dramatic battles in the Magyar Middle Zone, but also set the Gaugers back the most. I am certain that the Gaugers have stockpiled a lot of valuable assets in Pima Prime, Vess enthusiastically said. Even if we can't plunder them all, we can bombard them into pieces, thereby causing untold losses to the Fridaymen. However, our true prize from this victory is the glory and prestige we can attain from a decisive victory. Our Golden Skull Alliance will not only make a greater name for ourselves, but remind our allies and rivals that we have lost none of the fire that made us great in the first place. Vess cared about this a lot. Earlier on, the Golden Skull Alliance was able to earn a lot of respect and deter many potential rivals from acting against it due to its short, but rich track record of vanquishing numerous powerful opponents. The passage of time had caused that illustrious record to lose some of its luster. Though the Larkinsons and Crossers had made sure to display glimpses of their strength by undertaking many different mercenary missions over the years, none of them ever involved major battles like the ones the Alliance fought in the past. An assault on Pima Prime would completely refresh the Golden Skull Alliance's battle record. Not only would Vess and the others be able to demonstrate how much stronger they had grown over the years, they would also demonstrate a willingness to put it into use by launching a risky assault. This was a mad calculation that was bound to stir up a lot of unrest in the Larkinson clan. It did not matter whether Vess' justifications sounded a bit feeble. The fact of the matter was that the most powerful individual combat asset of the Golden Skull Alliance had only set his eyes on Pima Prime since the projection displayed the map of the Friday colonies. I will not agree to take part in any assault on the Gage dynasty unless we target Pima Prime, Patriarch Reginald Cross forcefully declared. Rotes, Yuma, and New Rams are defended by pushovers. I take no pleasure in crushing hostile expert pilots. The only opponent worth fighting is the sole ace pilot that has taken up residence in Pima Prime. Fighting him is the only way I can test my new strength and prove my enduring convictions. It is Pima Prime or bust. The meeting adjourned, with plenty of people feeling bewildered and out of depth. Nonetheless, the feelings of the doubters did not change the fact that the leadership of the three alliance partners had all voted in favor of committing to a bold attack. The Glory Seekers maintained a secure communication channel with the Wadden dynasty, which in turn kept in touch with the rest of the Hex Federation. This ensured that all of the involved parties were able to communicate quickly and securely. Even as the spies working for the Black's Cats and the Hexer intelligence agencies worked overtime to verify the leaked intelligence, the war leaders already drafted up a comprehensive assault plan. This was a major operation, to say the least, because the Hex Federation needed to commit at least 200,000 Mechs to the assault. In the past, the Hexadric hegemony could easily commit millions of Mechs to a general assault, but those times were over. The Hexers were only able to evacuate a limited amount of Mechs, starships, and industrial assets to the new frontier. Though the passage of time allowed them to build up their colonies and erect new production facilities, it was still unreasonable to be able to deploy more than a few 100,000 Mechs at once. Still, the Hexers were so eager to take advantage of the intelligence leaks that they scraped up every available carrier that they could gather and stuffed them full with as many combat Mechs as possible. The spies planted by the Friday men undoubtedly noticed the movements, but so what? Only a few high-level figures understood the truth. As long as they did not reveal that the upcoming assault was actually aimed at Pima Prime, it was fine even if the defenders went on high alert. Of course, the Hexers were keeping tabs on the Friday men as well. As long as the Gage dynasty or any of the other coalition partners started to converge their troops onto the 3 targets under consideration, then it became too unreasonable to proceed with the attack. This delicate dance caused many people to grow tense. While most of the soldiers of the Hex Federation did not receive any explanation from their superiors, they already figured out that they were about to take part in a major operation. Finally, it was about time we stop attacking those useless outposts. I've been longing for revenge. It's time to kick out the Friday Coalition out of our turf entirely. The Friday men, on the other hand, grew graver when they noticed the Hexers gearing up for war. They all bolstered the defenses of their colonies and prepared additional fast reaction fleets in order to quickly converge their dispersed troops to a colony under attack. So far, it did not appear as if the Friday men were aware of the true intentions of the Hexers. Much of the activity within the Friday colonies went towards bolstering the defenses of the weaker core colonies that were currently in the hands of the weaker coalition partners, such as the Carnegie Group and the Vermeer Group. These star systems were the logical choices to attack if the Hexers wanted to make a greater impact than raising a few backwater settlements. Interestingly enough, the Gage dynasty and the Khonsu clan made the least amount of adjustments during this time. They already possessed a considerable amount of confidence in their own defensive measures. Spies within their hierarchies also reported that the leadership of the 2 coalition partners did not exhibit that much urgency. So far, so good. As the plans to launch an attack became more concrete, the official starting date of the Trailblazer expedition also loomed closer. Many Larkinsons prepared to say goodbye to the friends and acquaintances that they had made among the locals of the Davute. Aurelia and Andrast even cried as they had to say farewell to the little playmates that they had grown familiar with at kindergarten. As the clan shipped more and more people and goods to the formidable expeditionary fleet, many Larkinsons still maintained the impression that they were about to travel in the direction of the center of the dwarf galaxy. The closer they traveled to the heart of the Red Ocean, the more likely they would fight against indigenous alien forces. The odds of encountering a hostile group of humans and entering into battle with them was not that great. This reflected back into the Larkinson clan's training and preparation work. A lot of emphasis had been put on increasing the Larkinson army's readiness to fight against powerful alien warships. That did not necessarily mean that the Larkinson Mech pilots forgot how to fight against conventional human Mech forces, but years of reduced emphasis on these kinds of engagements may have caused the Mech legions to grow rusty. General Verl recognized this shortcoming and instituted additional simulation drills. He even suspended live practice sessions in order to get Mech pilots to spend more time on refamiliarizing themselves with pure Mech combat. It just so happened that many of the battle scenarios that the Mech pilots had to go through were variations of the Battle of Reckoning. This allowed the Larkinson soldiers to understand and anticipate the mindset, tactics, Mech doctrines, and overall combat approach of the Friday men. In the meantime, Vess held a second meeting with Tristan. This time, the two old friends met at a more casual setting. Both of them sat in the back garden of the royal mansion. The idyllic scenery was one of the favorite playgrounds of Vess and Gloriana's children. Now, it had become host to a discussion about war and bloodshed. Tristan looked conflicted as he lifted up his teacup in order to take a sip of the chamomile tea that Vess had served. The patriarch of the Larkinson clan looked as relaxed as ever as he scratched Lucky's chin while sipping his own cup of tea. The Fridayman Mech designer eventually sighed and broke the peaceful silence. I came to Davut in the hopes of brokering peace between my people and the Hexers. Instead, I became the catalyst to another war, one that will extend the hatreds and animosity that should have been buried after the Komodo War has come to an end. Vess' lips curled upwards in amusement. Don't act so innocent, Tristan. Your actions have benefited the marginalized groups of the Friday Coalition. The only ones who are in trouble at the moment are the members of the Gage dynasty. They all deserve to get beaten for their arrogance. If they did not want to get targeted like this, then they should have treated you all better. Since they refuse to value their fellow compatriots in the coalition, then they have only themselves to blame when they are left to fend for themselves. Though a part of Tristan agreed with this stance, his sense of duty towards the Friday Coalition still could not come to terms with this development. The Komodo War has left its mark on me. I spent a decade of my life contributing to the war effort and dealing with the aftermath of widespread destruction. I have seen more death and destruction than I ever wanted. War is terrible, Vess. I do not wish its horrors on anyone, even the Hexers. I cannot fathom why the Hexers are so eager to resume the fight when they have suffered more than anyone else. Is it too much to ask for them to recognize how much harm they will do to both the Friday men and themselves? Vess leaned back on his garden chair and chuckled. That's unlikely. They're like bloodhounds. As long as they see weakness, they will pounce. I bet that the secret cabal from your state that is behind the leaks is aware of this as well. Why else would they turn the Godger Corps colonies into irresistible targets? Though Tristan had agreed to become the spokesperson of this so-called cabal, he was anything but happy with what he had put into motion. Yet he also agreed with the analysis that if the Gage dynasty's ambitions continued to go unchecked, the very fabric of the Friday Coalition might change for the worse. Tristan was just a Mech designer. He was never meant to get involved in matters of such import. He still struggled with the burden that his actions might set events into motion that would lead to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Friday men and the worsening of the quality of lives of many more innocent civilians. Compared to the obvious discomfort shown by the Fridayman Mech designer, Vess remained as unconcerned as ever. What you have done is not that different from designing Mechs, Tristan. Did you never think that the Mechs that you have designed or took part in their development will go on to fight and kill a lot of people? We are both makers of destructive weapon platforms. War is part of our business. If there is no fight, then our profession loses a lot of meaning. The Mech industry that we are a part of would have never become so large and prosperous if humanity was dominated by pacifists. That is different, Vess, Tristan frowned. Neither of us are soldiers who are responsible for pulling the trigger. Our Mechs may be used for destructive purposes, I admit, but they can also be used for other purposes. Deterrence is one of them, and defending against external alien enemies is another. Back when I originally decided to study Mech design, the Komodo Star sector used to be a lot more peaceful, you know. The Friday Coalition and the Hexadric hegemony maintained their restraint for 4 straight centuries. I thought that they could easily hold it in for 4 more centuries. Vess chuckled again. Assumptions do have a way of turning us into fools. I don't blame you for holding this sentiment. I also thought that the 2 second-rate states wouldn't have been stupid enough to risk everything on a single throw of the dice. Even so, you shouldn't complain about what has come to pass. Humans like you and me are accustomed to taking what we want by force. We did so on a massive scale during the Age of Conquest, and we have never gotten rid of this habit now that we are living in the Age of Mechs. War between the two states would have broken out eventually. Peace in this cosmos is a lie, and you are a fool to ever believe in it in the first place. I don't know, Vess. I would rather be a fool in a time of peace than a clever person in a time of war. The two Mech designers differed too much from each other. Their stances, their life experiences, and their ideologies were all shaped by vastly different circumstances. Though both of them had seen their fair share of bloodshed and tragedy, Vess still maintained his eagerness to seek confrontation, while Tristan had become far too jaded to feel any eagerness for more conflicts. You're not cut out to be a Mech designer if you continue to maintain this mindset, Vess eventually told his old friend. The work we do is intricately tied to military action. We are not responsible for what others wish to do with the Mechs that we design, but we should be cognizant that we are actively contributing to a climate where fights have become more common. If you don't want to take part in this, then I suggest you reconsider your career options. Tristan cynically snorted. There's no use. There are so many Mech designers in the industry that my departure will change nothing. The Friday Coalition alone still has lots of journeymen who are more than eager to take my place. Besides, what will I do? I have dedicated most of my life to learning how to design better Mechs. I painstakingly developed my design philosophy around empowering Mechs with special gems of my own making. To put that all aside would not only invalidate much of my life, but also disappoint Master Katzenberg and everyone else who believed in my potential. When Vess looked at Tristan, he saw a Mech designer who had lost his passion and drive for Mech design. It was a sad sight, to be honest. How could Mech designers ever put their all into designing Mechs and progressing their design philosophies if they questioned the righteousness of their work? This was an absurd situation. Vess treated Tristan as another bad example and resolved to never turn into a similar kind of loser. Tristan's depression and war weariness did not prevent him from continuing to act as a conduit between Vess and his backers. When the man was not complaining about the death and destruction that his actions may have put into motion, he dutifully relayed the words of the weaker coalition partners to Vess and the Hexers. Even though it might have been more convenient for the Carnegies and Vermeers to negotiate directly with the Hexers, it was impossible for this to happen. The two sides were still enemies. Not only that, it was incredibly taboo for the Friday men to openly plot for the downfall of one of its coalition partners. By continuing to communicate through Tristan, the damage of exposure would be kept at a minimum. At most, a single Fridayman Mech designer along with a few unimportant diplomats would take the fall for the scandal. Tristan had become more cognizant about this truth, as of late, which caused him to become even more disillusioned about the entire situation. Since Tristan frequently passed on information and received instructions from his current employers, he possessed a more thorough understanding of all of the preparations being made. The Hexers were moving into action. The Golden Skull Alliance was about to dispatch its formidable main fleet. The weaker coalition partners had made many assurances that their own Mech forces were staying put throughout this sensitive period. The latter was especially important to Vess and many other careful people. They still could not fully shake the possibility that this was all a giant trap that was ultimately aimed at the Hexer raiders, who had been causing a lot of misery to the Fridayman colonies. In order for the Carnegie Group and the Vermeer Group to demonstrate their sincerity, the Hexers requested information that confirmed that no friendly forces would be ready to reinforce the targeted star systems. This was not a difficult request to meet because the territories of the Fridayman colonies were relatively sparse and underdeveloped. There was quite a bit of distance between each major colony, which meant it would be too late to reinforce the Gaugers if no one moved beforehand. Of course, the Hexers weren't satisfied with this guarantee alone. They also wanted complete information on the movement of ships through the territory of the Friday colonies for the past few years, as well as permission to actively monitor the borders in case foreign fleets were lingering in the vicinity. These were all heavy demands that essentially forced the Friday colonies to expose a lot of information to the Hex Federation. Unfortunately for the people behind Tristan, the Hexers were well aware that they held the initiative in the negotiations. If the Hexers refused to attack the holdings of the Gage dynasty, then the internal situation of the Friday Coalition will continue to deteriorate. Both Vess and Tristan became quite surprised at how extensively the Carnegies and the Vermeers accommodated the unreasonable demands of the Hexers. The Friday men who had schemed against the Gage dynasty thoroughly proved their willingness to uphold their end of the deal and stay away from any major battles that might ensue. Minister Sheddarin Pernis easily figured out why the weaker coalition partners were not eager to compromise the deal or pull off any shenanigans. They are afraid Vess, the Carnegie Group, the Vermeer Group, the Vanguard Group, and the Puffer clan have all built their own costly settlements in the neighborhood. Who knows whether the massive Hexer assault army decides to take a detour and attack one of those colonies instead. They are all weaker and more vulnerable than the core colonies of the Gage dynasty. If I was in their place, I would do everything to fortify my own defenses. There are no Mechs to spare for ambushes and delayed reinforcement actions. That makes sense. I suggest that you should emphasize the inherent instability and impulsiveness of Hexer decision-making in your next meeting with Tristan. It is already enough if you are subtle about it. We just need to raise enough of a probability that their worst fears might come true to put enough fright in their hearts. That sounds fun. I'll be sure to do so. Since our fleet will be taking part in this assault as well, it is in our best interest to cow the Friday men into staying put. As all of this was taking place, the Golden Skull Alliance slowly completed all of its preparations. The Cat Nest and the Cross Production Complex became a lot less lively, as hundreds of thousands of Larkinsons and Crossers had fully relocated to the Allied fleet in orbit. Despite the large outflow of personnel and Mechs, the Cat Nest was still able to maintain normal activity. The clan had put a lot of effort into filling up the Davut branch. A lot of Mech pilots who had either chosen to retire from the main fleet or possessed lesser qualifications had chosen to serve in the local garrison and defense force. The branch's defense force was already capable of deploying 10,000 Mechs in battle, and that figure would soon rise to 15,000 Mechs by the end of the year. Those numbers sounded quite impressive, but the truth was that most of those Mechs were mid-range machines that were simpler and cheaper to design, build, and maintain. That was enough. The amount of Mechs patrolling the Cat Nest and manning the defensive stations had not dropped at all, which showed that the Davut branch was more than capable of defending the valuable site. Vess met with Branch Director Raymond Billingsley Larkinson one last time. I'm not sure whether our fleet will return to Davut after we have completed our assault on Pima Prime, Vess said. If the damage that we have suffered is limited, then we will probably head straight in the direction of the deep frontier. This means that it will probably take numerous years before we can reunite in person. The rejuvenated Raymond nodded in understanding. The Davut branch will not give you cause for concern. You have provided more than enough for us to take care of ourselves. We will do our best to serve as the custodians to all of your investments and business holdings on Davut Roman 7. That is good to hear. Take care and make sure to remind everyone that they are members of the Larkinson clan and not just the Davut branch. After touring the Cat Nest one more time, he stopped at the entrance of the royal mansion, where a number of bots brought out the last pieces of cargo from his home for the last 5 years. Vess could smell Gloriana's floral scent as she approached with a glum expression. Aurelia, Andrast, and Marvane all followed after her while wearing black, formal outfits. It looked as if his wife and children dressed up for a wedding instead of an ordinary departure. I still think that this is a mistake, Gloriana whined. This again. It's a bit too late to complain now that we are on the cusp of leaving. I hate you, you know that. Just look at how your decision has made our kids sad. When Vess looked down at his children, he saw that Aurelia had already come to terms with the decision. Meanwhile, Andrast and Marvane actually appeared as if they both looked forward to going on an adventure. "I think our kids can manage. Isn't that right, my babies?" "This is for the good of the clan," Aurelia said in a proper tone. "I want to see our Mechs fight against the evil aliens." Pew pew pew. Gloriana gnashed her teeth at this response. "Come on, honey. They're just kids. They are a lot more adaptable than you think. Living aboard the Spirit of Bentheim will be fun. We can also take them on excursions to other ships like the Vivacious Wow if we want to enjoy a bit of quality time. We can also bring them to new and exotic planets. Their childhoods will be utterly unique. No one else can raise them like us. Doesn't that sound great?" "I wanted our children to be more civilized than you," Gloriana complained again. "The Trailblazer expedition will make it harder for me to ensure they remain proper and obedient. I don't want our children to be too stiff and dull. They are much more adorable when they show their personality." Vess and Gloriana could never quite agree on this, so they eventually put their argument aside and brought their children away. As their escorted shuttle ascended through the atmosphere, Vess peeked out of the window and took one last look at the globe that was growing smaller and smaller before his eyes. He truly did not know when he would return, or if he would ever have the chance to step foot on the planet again. All he knew was that his clan could not remain shackled to Davut. No matter how much the Larkinsons had grown their roots in the local community, Vess only considered the Krakatoa Middle Zone to be a temporary stop. Once the shuttle smoothly landed in the Spirit of Bentheim's hangar bay, Gloriana took their children to the grand stateroom that they hadn't occupied for years, while Vess headed towards the bridge. Along the way, Vess briefly equipped himself with his upgraded unending regalia before he stepped foot on one of the control centers of the upgraded factory ship. Much had changed over the past few years. Every capital ship had received extensive upgrades, and the Spirit of Bentheim was no different. Her defenses, her production capabilities, and her mobility had all received substantial improvements, making her more useful to the expeditionary fleet than ever. Vess did not spend his time on admiring all of the improvements of the ship. He readied himself to address his entire clan. Soon, every clansman stopped and stood at attention while facing the nearest projection of their patriarch. Over 500,000 Larkinsons had been spread throughout the fleet, while 100,000 more clansmen were standing by at the local branch. These were unprecedented numbers, and spoke of how quickly the Larkinson clan had grown since their initial arrival in Davut. "My fellow Larkinsons," Vess spoke as he deliberately adopted a more martial and forceful air. "The time for peace and relaxation has passed. Our hibernation has come to an end. Fire has always been in our blood, and it is time to reignite it by seeking out challenges that can better ourselves and our fellow clansmen." Vess swept his armored limb around his body. "The Red Ocean has much to offer to pioneers. The Purgatory campaign was but one of the instances where our clan managed to get ahead. There are many other treasures in this new and turbulent galaxy that can allow us to leap past our peers and rivals. Many of these opportunities may be fraught with danger, but with the increase in our combat strength, I am confident that we can navigate each peril that we might face." Vess earnestly smiled. "Remember this day and remember your resolve to grow the clan. Life within our clan will not be as relaxed as before. There will be times where you need to obey orders unconditionally and trust in the strategies adopted by your superiors. While you are allowed to have questions, know that we are all trying to do what is best for our clan and our families. I, like many of you, have brought my wife and children along this expedition because I sincerely believe that what we are doing will not only succeed, but put our entire clan much further ahead than if we continued to linger in Davut." He closed his eyes and briefly envisioned the faces of his children. Reminding himself of them steeled his resolve to do right by his offspring. Once he opened his eyes, he slowly raised his fist. "Today, I declare the start of our Trailblazer expedition. Let us plunder as much wealth from this dwarf galaxy as possible. For the clan. For the clan. Papa, what is this? Aurelia curiously poked at a projection that showed a glimpse of a report related to a possible assault on Pima Prime. She sat cutely on Vess' lap as she tried to figure out what her father was doing. That's an analysis on the defenses of a star system held by an enemy. Vess replied as he dove in to kiss her head. What enemy? The Friday Coalition. Mama mentioned that before. What is the Friday Coalition? It's a state that is located in the Komodo star sector, all the way back in the old galaxy, where you were born. Home. The star sector used to be our home, but no more. Our ships are our homes now. Anyway, the Friday men who originate from that state have come all the way here to the Red Ocean to build new homes. That is bad, because the Friday men are our enemies. Why? Because they are bad guys who once tried to hurt me and take me away from your mother. If the Friday men had their way, your mother and I wouldn't have been married, and we would never have precious children like you and your siblings. That is bad. Friday men are all bad guys. That's right, Aurelia. Never trust the Friday men. They hurt us a lot while we hurt them back. If we keep meeting each other, we can't help but hurt each other until one of us can't take it anymore. It's a pretty sad reality. Vess sighed. His daughter turned her head and stared up at her father with her big and expressive eyes. Can't you be friends again? Mama says talking always helps. It's not that simple. Your mother is right in a way, but talking only helps if both sides want a kiss and make up. While a part of the Friday men have indeed tried to do so, there are still too many of them that just want to hurt us and make us cry. Instead of waiting for our enemies to get strong enough to do that to us, we have decided to strike first and ruin their colony. Why? If we burn their biggest colony to the ground, our enemies won't be able to stay in the Red Ocean anymore. Hopefully, they will get so discouraged that they will tuck their tails between their legs and run back to the old galaxy. Oh, Aurelia looked fascinated. Vess continued to explain his geopolitical considerations to his cute little girl in an oversimplified manner. Though it was way too early to expose Aurelia to adult topics like waging war and trying to demoralize an enemy with excessive violence, his baby daughter was not a normal girl. Though Vess rejected the outdated and illogical customs of noble houses, he had to admit that it was hard not to pick up on their best practices. If Vess wanted his clan and his family line to continue as prosperously as possible, it was never too soon to groom a replacement for his leadership position. He quickly glanced at his prosperity tree that had remained on his display case all this time. The small tree had grown thicker and more lush since he last checked it. He did not want to see it droop again, even though he did not really believe in the superstition that its growth was related to the clan's success. Nonetheless, when the time came for Vess to pass on his weighty mantle, he wanted one of his children to be competent and prepared enough to lead the Larkinson clan to a new epoch. Right now, Aurelia was the best candidate. She was the oldest of his children, and her genetics were tailored for the job. Though Vess did not entirely rule out the possibility that Aurelia might prefer to assume a different job, and that one his other children might end up inheriting his patriarch position. For now, he was more than willing to teach his oldest the tricks of the trade. As father and daughter continued to enjoy their shared moment together, the hatch to his office slid open without warning. Vess, Gloriana yelled as she stomped inside. Meow. Meow. Lucky and Clixie, who had been cuddling against each other on a couch, both jumped from their cozy positions and scurried behind the bulky, armored form of an honor guard. The cats both knew that when Gloriana used this tone, there was bound to be an argument. Both Vess and Aurelia looked up at the angry mother. "What's up, Gloriana?" Vess innocently asked. "Don't act like you don't know. Why didn't you tell me that you were going to attack the Friday men?" "Huh, where did you hear that from? That is supposed to be a secret." "It wasn't that hard to figure out, Vess. We are traveling in the exact wrong direction from the stated goal of the Trailblazer expedition. Instead of traveling towards the center of the Red Ocean, we are doing the opposite. That's because we are picking up a new fleet carrier commissioned on behalf of the Glory Seekers. The new vessel is too valuable to be shipped to Davut by herself, so our fleet is taking a short detour to the Magyar Middle Zone to pick up the new capital ship, as well as a few other high-value goods that we have ordered from the Hex Federation. This was the excuse that the Golden Skull Alliance had come up with after deciding to take part in the surprise attack on Pima Prime. Although neither the Hexers nor the Golden Skullers believed that they could maintain the confidentiality of the ironically named Operation Saturday Market forever, it was best if the Gage dynasty remained in the dark as long as possible. It would be rather suspicious if the Golden Skull Alliance randomly traveled to the Magyar Middle Zone when they were supposed to travel closer to the front lines of the ongoing invasion of the Red Ocean. Fortunately, the Glory Seekers and the Hexers quickly figured out a plausible arrangement. Originally, the Glory Seekers were supposed to receive a new and large fleet carrier from the Hex Federation. With a total capacity of 1,000 mechs, the vengeance of the hegemony played a key role in bolstering the operational strength of the expeditionary fleet. However, the construction of the 3.1-kilometer-long fleet carrier had suffered numerous delays due to her high specifications. The shipyard responsible for constructing her ran short of key materials needed to build powerful ship parts. While the Hexers managed to complete the vengeance of the hegemony just in time, the onset of Operation Saturday Market prompted the Hexers to change their plans. By making it so that the Golden Skull Alliance needed to pick up the brand-new fleet carrier as well as a few other valuable goodies, hardly anyone thought that there was more behind this trip. Gloriana wasn't fooled, though. "Don't lie to me, Vess. I have my sources. I already know about the plan to attack Pima Prime. What were you thinking when you tried to keep me out of the discussion? I'm your wife, Vess. You're supposed to be more forthcoming about matters like these." "Don't yell so much, Gloriana. What did I tell you about raising your voice in front of our children? Don't make Aurelia upset." Their girl already started to look confused. The mention of their daughter snapped Gloriana out of her tirade. Her eyes softened with love as she directed her attention to her pretty little daughter. She walked around the desk and snatched Aurelia out of Vess' lap. "They're there, baby. Mama is here. Everything will be all right." "Why is Mama angry again?" "Mama is angry because your father is a dum-dum again. He's been very naughty as of late by trying to keep a secret from me. Your father needs to learn that he is not supposed to handle these matters alone. I am also a part of the Larkinson clan." Vess was not impressed with the words spoken by his wife. "Gloriana, there is no use even if you know. The planning and decision-making surrounding Operation Saturday Market is a high-level strategic affair. You're a Mech designer. Your input is not needed. We already have Master Benedict Cortez and numerous other Hexer masters who are capable of analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of the leaked Fridayman Mech designs." Gloriana let out a noise in frustration. "I am not irrelevant. I am your wife. I am a Hexer and a Wadden as well, so I have a clear interest in defeating the Fridaymen. In addition to that, I am a mother who doesn't want our children to come to harm. While I am not trying to stop you from attacking an important stronghold of the Gage dynasty, I have serious doubts and objections about launching an attack with our entire fleet. We have too many ships that have no business on the battlefield." Vess grimaced and crossed his arms. "You already know why we have to do this. Do you think I like dragging the spirit of Bentheim, the vivacious Wal, and the diligent Ovenbird to one of the biggest battlefields in this zone? I don't, but I don't have a choice. It's not just about maintaining the solidarity of all of our clansmen. It's about keeping everything we care about by our side. We can't trust the authorities in Davut to protect all of our valuable but vulnerable non-combat ships." "Then why not park the ships in question in the Hex Federation?" Gloriana suggested. "The Wadden dynasty is my family, but yours as well. Brutus, Ranya, and myself are all married to you Larkinsons. If there is anyone you can trust in this dwarf galaxy, it will be my relatives. My mother would love to spend time with her grandchildren. Though she can always talk to our children over the galactic net, there is nothing better than hugging them in person. She would be more than willing to extend her dynasty's protection to our civilian vessels. You can go off and satisfy your violent and destructive urges, while our children and I will remain utterly safe and far away from any scary and threatening Friday men. While Vess acknowledged that Gloriana had made a few good points, her tone did not sit well with him. However, the bigger problem was that he did not want to leave Aurelia, Andrast, and most importantly Marvain in the clutches of his in-laws for weeks on end. Who knew how much Hexer poison Madame Constance Wadden would instill in the minds of his innocent children? No. No what? I am not stashing our civilians and civilian vessels at the Wadden dynasty. It goes against clan policy to entrust our family and our most vulnerable assets to third parties. While I am sure that the Hex Federation is trustworthy enough, I am not in the habit of making any exceptions. You are the clan patriarch. You are the one who set this rule in the first place. You can easily reverse IT as long as you do the right thing. Don't yell so much, honey. Look at what you're doing to our daughter. Aurelia didn't like it when her parents were screaming at each other. Her eyes already began to tear up as she began to squirm in her mother's grasp. Wait, Mama doesn't love Papa anymore. Gloriana panicked all of a sudden. That's not true, baby. Mama and Papa still love each other. We are just having a disagreement, that's all. Mama and Papa are both happy with each other. Isn't that right, Vess? The warning tone at the end made sure to remind Vess that he needed to play along. He quickly nodded. That's right. Your mother and father aren't breaking up. In fact, we will make sure to stay by each other's side even as we commence our attack on the bad guys that I have pointed out. We'll remain as one happy family, as our forces overrun the Friday Men defensive lines and lay waste to their precious settlement. Aurelia's tears dried up remarkably quickly after that. She even giggled and clapped at the prospect of enjoying another family outing. Yay. Her mother, on the other hand, had grown speechless. As the large and formidable expeditionary fleet crossed the border between Krakatoa and Magyar, no incidents occurred. Though space was anything but safe these days, hardly anyone wanted to provoke a formidable pioneering alliance. It was well known that the Golden Skull Alliance was not only capable of fielding more than a Mech division worth of crack troops, but also enjoyed the protection of a genuine ace pilot and ace Mech. Any group with or without a brain knew better than to provoke the expeditionary fleet. Its intimidation factor became so high that any other ships or fleets in the same star system actually took the initiative to increase the distance. It would be a tragedy if they created a misunderstanding. The only possible enemies that might ignore the deterrence of the main fleet were indigenous alien forces and feral astral beasts. The chances of bumping into either of them was fairly rare, though. Years had passed since the Big Two conquered the Magyar Middle Zone and Krakatoa Middle Zone. Many subsequent human forces had poured in and cleaned up all of the alien stragglers that managed to escape the initial net. These days, most of human-occupied space had become a lot safer than before. At the very least, a lot of groups such as the Friday Men and Hexers became more worried about fending off threats from each other than random Voribug swarms or Pulmer retribution fleets. This was also one of the reasons why Vess was eager to head towards the deep frontier. He had already seen his fair share of combat against human Mech forces. He would much rather bump against new and interesting aliens that could give him a lot more surprises on and off the battlefield. Too many people are way too obsessed about fighting other humans. Vess shook his head in disappointment. The aliens are our real enemies. Fighting them is a much worthier case and more profitable besides. He understood why a lot of people didn't hold much interest in challenging humanity's external opponents. It was hard to put up a fair fight against Titanic phase whales and enormous Nuncer warships that could give the Big Two a run for their money. Not even the Golden Skull Alliance dared to stray too close to the front lines and seek a confrontation against the strongest alien fighting forces. In any case, with nothing special happening during this period, Vess spent most of his time on participating in the planning of the upcoming assault. The scope of Operation Saturday Market was enormous. While the amount of Mechs involved in the fighting was not as exaggerated as the biggest and deadliest battles of the Komodo War, the strategic importance of the upcoming confrontation was just as great, if not greater. A victory would drastically weaken the strongest pillar of the Friday Coalition and give its weaker partners a much-needed reprieve. A defeat would not only damage the Golden Skull Alliance in a time where it could least afford it, but also alter the balance of power between the Friday colonies and the Hex Federation by weakening the latter. There was too much riding in this operation for the Hexers and the Golden Skullers to fail. If not for the fact that many indications looked favorable, Vess and the others wouldn't have maintained their willingness to launch such a risky operation. While the Black Cats and other spies continued to keep a close eye on the Friday men, more and more information poured in from many different sources. The intelligence continued to confirm and expand the leaks provided by Tristan. The Hexers knew so much about Pima Prime and its extensive defensive plans that they could even conduct rudimentary simulation training of the upcoming invasion. The Larkinsons and the Glory Seekers began to fight repeated battles in a simulated version of the port system with the help of the MSDS. Most of the crossers did not have access to living Mechs, so it was impossible to grant them a connection to the MSDS unless they hopped into the cockpit of a Larkinson Mech. However, each of them made do by completing virtual training scenarios with regular simulation training systems. The Mech pilots weren't stupid. Even without a formal announcement, many of them figured out what they were preparing to do. There was no other reason to conduct repeated training sessions on attacking a major fortified star system. Why are we preparing to launch an assault on Pima Prime? We're Larkinsons, not Hexers. I didn't sign up to fight in a continuation of the Komodo War. The Patriarch must have his plans. We are much stronger than the enemy. There's no way we can lose. The Friday men killed my brother. I never got the opportunity to take revenge on them until now. Just as Vess and the other leaders expected, the sentiment among the soldiers were mixed, but not too opposed towards this upcoming action. By this time, General Verl and the Legion commanders had made it clear that the Golden Skull Alliance only committed to a single battle against the Friday men. Once the Larkinsons and their allies concluded Operation Saturday Market, they would get back on track and start the Trailblazer expedition in earnest. As Vess and his fellow lead designers began to spend time on advising the Mech legions on how to deploy their signature Mechs against the Friday men, a few Larkinsons expressed their misgivings about their participation. It did not surprise Vess at all to see Janzi showing up one day. The expert pilot had never changed her stance, but she rarely kicked up a fuss these days. What was different was that she visited his workspace in the design labs while being accompanied by her young son. Vess, frankly, did not expect his cousin to go as far as to marry a clansman and bear a son. He thought that her will was so focused on following her convictions that there wasn't any room for love in her heart. It appeared that he thought too simply about her and other strong-willed expert pilots. Just like many other Larkinsons, Janzi did her duty and started her own family. "Hello, Patriarch," the boy politely greeted as he had been taught. "Hello, Mercer." Vess smiled back as he turned his attention away from the schematic of one of the key Mechs of the Friday men. "How are you today? Are you adjusting well to life on a ship?" "It is fun. Everything is so cool. I miss our old home. I want to go back one day." "Haha, maybe your wish will come true." Mercer was a cute boy that shared a lot of resemblances with Marvane. Since the two were roughly of the same age, they frequently spent time together. The two Mtekes shared none of the tension that their parents held towards each other, and already turned into bosom buddies. Seeing that Janzi was growing impatient, Vess picked up Lucky, who was dozing on a nearby workbench, and tossed the clueless gem cat in the direction of Mercer. Meow. You go play with Lucky, all right. Your mother and I have grown-up business to talk about. Okay. As Lucky began to distract Mercer, Janzi strode forward and stood in front of Vess. We need to talk, she spoke as her powerful will pressed against Vess. I can gather that seeing as you visited me unannounced. What are you doing, really? Why did you decide to participate in this fool's errand? Don't tell me it is because you care about the Hexers. I know you well enough that you would never easily commit our entire fleet on such a dangerous operation. Your grudges against the Friday men shouldn't be serious enough for you to take such a drastic step, either. What motivates you into taking part in a conflict that is none of our business? There were many reasons why Vess was in favor of this action, but he didn't think it would be a good idea to reveal them all to a busybody like Venerable Janzi. We need to test our strength. What better way than to fight against an opponent that we know extremely well? Besides, we also need to use this opportunity to show off to others that we are not to be trifled with. We have grown a lot more formidable than before, but not everyone is aware of all of the gains we have made. Demonstrating our ability in combat will do much in keeping our clan and clansmen safe against opportunists looking to take advantage of us. Think about the family we have left behind in Davut. Our branch there is well protected, but it wouldn't hurt to amplify our reputation so that our branch members can stay safe. His arguments primarily emphasized the safety of the Larkinson clan. This was what Janzi cared about the most. While his words sounded nice, Janzi wasn't fooled. We can demonstrate our combat prowess in many other ways. If we just proceeded with the Trailblazer expedition as planned, we would have stumbled upon an alien fleet sooner or later. Fighting against the aliens that wish to do humanity harm is a much nobler and worthier cause than getting dragged back into a grudge war between two human groups. Vess scratched his head. I don't disagree with you, but there is a difference between being noble and being naive. We have lots of enemies in human space, you know. There are a lot of rivals based in Davut that would love nothing more than to push us away. There are also competitors based in other port systems, such as Mech, that are also eager to get rid of us. I can't tell you how many times our black cats have foiled malicious attempts to harm our clansmen and sabotage our assets. That may be true, but what does that have to do with Operation Saturday Market? As I've said before, we can build up a reputation in many other ways besides attacking a Fridayman colony. What is it you are really after? Are you aiming to plunder Pima Prime like you did at Purgatory? Are you trying to add another notable but easy victory under your belt? Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this battle less about furthering the interests of our clan and more about satisfying your ego and vanity? This line of questioning quickly began to grate on Vess. There was no way he wanted to get caught by her rhythm. That would only lead to undesirable outcomes. Stop, Vess raised his palm. Stop with these stupid questions. Let's just skip all of this nonsense and get to the real point that you are trying to make. What do you want, Janzi? What is the purpose of your visit? Venerable Janzi paused for a moment. She grimaced at the thought of all of the bloodshed that might ensue. I have come on behalf of myself and other concerned Larkinsons, many of whom don't dare to speak out against you. I want you to guarantee to us that if our side manages to win the upcoming battle, our forces and the Hexer forces must refrain from slaughtering the defenseless Fridaymen citizens as much as possible. You are asking a bit much, Janzi. Don't you get that this is the war we're talking about? There is no room for mercy on the battlefield. The Fridaymen and the Hexers have managed to avoid excessive civilian casualties in most battles. Whenever one of them conquer a star system, they have never committed any mass murders. Vess snorted. That's because the rules of the game are different in the old galaxy. The Friday Coalition and the Hexadric Hegemony had no choice but to abide by the directives set by the MTA and CFA. It just so happens that the rules are a lot looser in the Red Ocean. It is not uncommon to hear about entire colonies and their populations disappearing from existence. This is the reality of the new frontier. Those who venture in this lawless space must bear the risks associated with profiting from it. If you object to this regime, then take it up with the Big Two. I am not talking about the Big Two, Vess. I am talking about what we can do to limit any unnecessary bloodshed. We cannot be party to an incident where we become culpable to the deaths of millions of civilians. Vess couldn't believe what he heard. How could she be so foolish? Although Vess wanted to get rid of Janzi right away, he knew that he needed to give her a satisfactory answer. Pissing off an expert pilot was never a good idea. Pissing off Janzi when he knew that she spoke for a larger group of clansmen also wasn't wise. Part of being a patriarch was to placate his constituents when they opposed his policies and decisions. He did not pay too much attention to this in the past, but as the Larkinson clan grew explosively in the last few years, the situation had gradually become more complex. Hundreds of thousands of people had come from every corner of the old galaxy and joined the Larkinson clan. The fact that they managed to get through the screening meant that they were at least somewhat compatible with his ideology. However, it was hard to recruit qualified manpower that were just as aggressive and ambitious as himself. A lot of professionals who had joined the clan in the last 5 years were much more innocent and naive than the battle-tested veterans that had gone through the Battle of Reckoning, the Battle of Fordilla Zentra, and the Purgatory campaign. These newer adopted Larkinsons never developed any personal grudges against the Friday Men. They only heard about the hatred that the Larkinson clan held towards the Friday Coalition, but never became involved with it until recently. If Vess wanted to maintain the cohesion of all 500,000 Larkinsons in the fleet, then he needed to be more considerate about the needs of the ones that weren't eager to bash the faces of the Friday Men. He sighed again. I know it is hard to get this through your thick expert pilot skull, but you vastly overestimate my influence. While I am willing to restrain our fellow Larkinsons, I have no power in stopping the Hexers from doing what they want. The Hexers who have fled to the Red Ocean have all done so because they were driven out by the Friday Men. The hatred between these two groups is irreconcilable. Even Janzi couldn't deny that the Friday Men and Hexers were unlikely to become friends, but that didn't mean she should give up on her quest. Where is your humanity? Oh, I forgot. You corroded it many years ago. You're a Mech designer without a conscience. Humanity is a lot uglier than you think. Imagine if this situation was reversed and that it is the Friday colonies plotting to attack the Hex Federation. The Friday Men would have butchered the Hexers without any hesitation if they managed to succeed in an attack. The Hexers are merely defending their own civilians, many of whom are also innocent, by the way, from unjust slaughter by striking first. That is the stupidest and most deceitful argument that I have heard from you so far. You're despicable, Vess, the expert pilot snarled. Then let me give you another dose of reality. The ultimate truth is that the Magyar Middle Zone is too small to accommodate the Friday Men and Hexers. They're going to fight and kill each other no matter what you think about it, because they're never going to respect your opinion. At least now a fight will take place while the colonies are relatively underdeveloped. Only millions will die instead of billions. Isn't that great? Vess crossed his arms. If you want to issue a demand from me, then be realistic. Even without our clan's involvement, the Hex Federation still would have committed to this attack. They would be fools not to, after one group of Friday Men sold out another group of Friday Men. Hell, even our allies would have continued without us. The Glory Seekers are literally Hexers, while Patriarch Reginald Cross will jump at any legitimate opportunity to duel against an ace pilot. This attack will proceed without our participation. What are you saying, Vess? Instead of trying to stop the inevitable, you should focus on trying to accomplish a goal that is within your power, he calmly said. Don't forget you are just one of many expert pilots in our clan and alliance. If you happen to be an ace pilot, we would take your opinions much more seriously, but even then it is unlikely that you can do much to change our course unless you can convince Saint Reginald to reconsider his intentions. For now, your voice is limited, and you need to accept that, Janzi." The woman's face turned ugly. She understood this truth quite well due to being confronted by it many times. Even though her progress as an expert pilot was quite impressive, there were plenty of other expert pilots that also performed well within the clan. Aside from that, the influence of Patriarch Reginald was too great. Even though he was not as clever and ingenious as Vess, being an ace pilot allowed Reginald a lot of opposition by force or by the admiration he drew from his strength. There were many times where Janzi saw how easily Reginald got things done by issuing decrees. If she was as powerful as him, she too would have been able to change the direction of her entire clan. The expert pilot shook her head. She was far from reaching this height. She needed to bide her time and wait until she developed to a point where she could restore a bit of sanity in the Larkinson clan. In the meantime, she accepted Vess' advice and took a step back. She thought for a moment before she came up with a more realistic alternative. "Then, can you convince the Hexers to show more restraint in battle? I don't mean that they should hold back against hostile combatants. The Friday Men Mech pilots and defensive personnel are all soldiers who have accepted the risks that come with the job. The civilians haven't. They are earnest colonists and immigrants that have moved to the Red Ocean in order to build a new future for themselves and their families. Please tell our forces and the forces of our allies to spare them if possible. I can understand it if the civilians take up arms, but there is no reason to harm them as long as they do nothing but cower in their shelters." That was a more sensible suggestion. Vess seriously considered the possibility. "Our people are honorable, so they will not be a party to any massacres. The Crossers are the same. I'm not sure about the Glory Seekers and the Hexers, though. The war against the Friday Men has run too deep. In a state of total war, the civilian population of the Friday colonies are all invaluable assets. Even if they don't directly serve in the armed forces, they are still capable of farming food, mining exotics, producing mechs, manning starships, and handling all the bureaucracy. Sparing these civilians will mean that they will eventually put their time and effort into endeavors that will cause a lot of harm to the Hex Federation." Janzi's face grew ugly again. "You can't convince the Hexers to do even this. What I am saying is that sparing the Friday Men will leave future dangers behind that will come to bite the Hex Federation in the butt. It is not in the best interest of the Hexers to make a decision that will only cause further harm for themselves." "Hehehe, that is funny. In my opinion, the Hexers are quite good at self-harm." Janzi darkly chuckled. "Well, you may have had a point in the past, but they've lost a lot of their hubris. They will definitely make certain that they are not as careless as before. That will only strengthen their resolve to crush the Friday Men as much as possible. It is unrealistic for the Hexer soldiers to spare any mercy towards the civilian colonists residing in Pima Prime. Your reasoning is not good enough." This put Janzi in a bind. She could not in good conscience allow herself to leave without a result. If she wanted to do more than pay lip service to values, then she needed to be more earnest in upholding her noble ideals. "Then, what about taking the Friday Men civilians prisoner?" she reluctantly suggested. "Go on. It will be just like what you have done with the Packlatons. Since you're willing to spare alien civilians, there is no reason why the Hexers can do the same with the Friday Men. Taking prisoners is a common occurrence in war. The Hexers don't have to do this for nothing. Human lives are valuable. It is impossible for the Gage dynasty to allow millions of its citizens to languish in captivity. The Hex Federation can ransom the prisoners or use them as leverage for a swap. I am certain that the Friday Coalition captured a lot of Hexer soldiers during the Komodo War. If these Hexer prisoners are still languishing in their cells, then they can finally be freed after the two sides make a deal." This was a much better argument than what Vess had heard before. While it was a lot harder to take so many prisoners in a short amount of time, it should be viable as long as the Hex Federation made additional preparations. Most colony settlements in the Red Ocean offered robust emergency shelters for its citizens in case they came under attack. These shelters could mostly be found deep underground and were all hardened against determined attacks and orbital bombardment. Normally, it took a lot of time and effort to find and breach these shelters. It was much easier to shatter them entirely with overwhelming might than to delicately drill an entrance and capture every person inside with non-lethal force. The situation was different this time. The leaked intelligence happened to include thorough blueprints and maps that showed the locations, capacities, and other traits of each emergency shelter. This made it at least 10 times easier to break into them and empty them of people. Vess smiled at Janzi. I will pass on this suggestion to the Hexers. I think it has a lot of merit. While killing prisoners will undoubtedly set back the Friday men, the Hexers can gain even greater profit if they make good use of their new bargaining chips. However, I should warn you that accidents can always happen on the battlefield. Mechs aren't known for being gentle. I hope you adjust your expectations properly. As long as our side doesn't engage in butchery, I will take it. I hope we can put this sordid operation behind us as soon as possible and head towards the deep frontier where we can fight against proper opponents. I truly cannot understand why we humans have to fight at all. Aren't there enough territories in the Red Ocean for people to colonize? Why couldn't the Friday men and Hexers settle further away from each other? Occupying star systems in the same zone is just asking for trouble. Vess cluelessly shrugged. I don't know either. People are strange like that. The Friday men and Hexers simply can't let each other go. Not even relocating to the new frontier can change their obsession towards each other. These people would have benefited humanity a lot more if they stopped fighting against each other and turned their firepower against the aliens. Janzi said while shaking her head in disappointment. They're like children that can't accept the need to share their toys. Although I don't like it, our race is aggressively encroaching on the territories of other races. This is at least more sensible than allowing humans to fight and kill each other like nothing has changed. This is part of human nature, Janzi. Even in a situation where there are a lot of star systems up for grabs, we can't help but want to monopolize the best star systems with the richest resources. This is why Davut and Makhero are slowly entering into a collision course, even though there is still a lot more room for expansion in their own colonies. We just keep wanting to obtain more. What if we stop wanting more? Then we'll get overtaken by hostile alien races that are more hungry and have made more gains than us. There is no way out. We can either keep progressing as fast as we can or we die. Today was a special day. As the expeditionary fleet moved deeper into the Magyar Middle Zone, the Hex Federation and the Golden Skull Alliance collected and verified enough intelligence to flesh out Operation Saturday Market. The complete and comprehensive attack plan was an extremely complex affair that could fill up an entire library. The Larkinson clan was simply unable to plan out so many details, movements, and actions in advance. Fortunately, the Hexers had evacuated plenty of veteran strategists and staff officers from the Hex Army to the Red Ocean. Many of them were involved in the planning and data analysis of multiple major military operations. Each of them earnestly pooled their efforts to formulate a thorough and realistic attack plan in the shortest possible time. Much of it fell out of the scope of the Larkinson clan and the Golden Skull Alliance. They involved tedious and troublesome matters such as preparing the logistics for all of the Mech units, deploying scouting ships at star systems that might hide secret reinforcements, and charting numerous different escape routes to avoid interception from angry Friday men. The plan also went into thorough detail on what the different fleet elements and Mech units should do once they arrived in the Pima Prime star system. As a port system that served a similar purpose as Davut, the place contained more than just a single terraformed and colonized planet. Even though all of the Larkinson Mech pilots had familiarized themselves with the probable opposition that they might face once they ventured into Pime Prime, the latest update from the Hex Federation finally clarified the role that the Golden Skull Alliance would play in the upcoming operation. It was not easy for Mech pilots to keep their heads in a massive war theater. Pima Prime was almost as large and developed as Davut, so there were a lot of objectives and a lot of opposition that was spread out over many different areas. In order to ensure that every Larkinson Mech pilot remained on the same page, General Verl decided to hold a general briefing. The briefing was a bit different from normal, however. Instead of standing in front of a stage where General Verl held a lecture that would be broadcast in different assembly halls across many different carrier vessels, he decided to take advantage of the latest technology and hold a more immersive event. "Can you do this, Vess?" Vess frowned for a moment as he parsed the man's suggestion. "I never really thought about it before, but theoretically it should be possible. You already maintain a connection with the Golden Cat, but the bandwidth isn't too big. However, I think that as long as you limit your actions to speaking and moving a few limbs, I don't think there is a problem with your question. You've actually given me a lot of food for thought. Let me see what I can do. This won't take too long." After Vess made a few additional improvisations, the general briefing commenced. Vulcan had to work overtime to simulate a large and complete spiritual simulation of the Pima Prime system. The central star and all of the planets and significantly sized moons were rendered in impressive detail. The MSDS even portrayed the basic shapes of the asteroid belts and planetary rings, and displayed parts of it in much greater detail if there were areas of interest. At the same time, over 10,000 Mech pilots simultaneously entered the cockpits of their Mechs and interfaced with their battle partners. Together, both the Mechs and Mech pilots engaged the MSDS in unison. Vulcan accepted each of the incoming connections and caused the Mech pilots to appear above the star system's plane, giving them an impressive view of Pima Prime. The simulation did not just display the stars and planets with the naked eye. The MSDS also displayed numerous markings and annotations to show the orbits of the satellites and the estimation population of humans on every settled part of the star system. After giving all of the Mech pilots a bit of time to take in the new setting, the simulated form of General Verl appeared in front of the floating crowd. The man felt as if he was a specter who was about to egg on an army of ghosts. He inwardly sighed at how amazing the MSDS was at making him feel as if he was really floating above the Pima Prime system. The sense of realism was far beyond any virtual simulation programs he had tried. "My fellow soldiers, welcome to Pima Prime. Each of you have conducted many simulated fights in this star system already, but now that the Hexers and us have tentatively finalized our plan, I can finally tell you what we will be doing once we commence the actual operation." Every Larkinson Mech pilot connected to the MSDS perked up. The expert pilots who floated at the front of the massive crowd were more attentive than most. The general first swept his arm across the star system down below. "Let's get the basics out of the way. Pima Prime is of great significance to the Gage dynasty. It is one of the few port systems of the Friday colonies, and it is relatively abundant in common resources. This makes it a great place to build up a colony quickly and steadily turn it into an economic and industrial hub of the surrounding region." He waved his arm. The presentation changed as the simulation displayed the flow of traffic that passed through the star system in the last few years. As you can see, the port system is functioning exactly as intended. Many comparisons have been made between Pima Prime and Davut, but the biggest difference between the two is that the former is backed by a single state, while the latter is founded by a conglomerate of different pioneers. What this means is that 80 to 90% of all of the people, traffic, and most importantly, Mechs in Pima Prime hail from the Friday Coalition, or more specifically, the Gage dynasty. The reason why Davut attracted so much traffic from people who originated from all over the old galaxy was that it did not overtly attach itself to any legacy powers. The pioneers who packed up their bags and passed through the Beyonder Gate wanted to found their own sovereign states. Each of them dreamt of becoming the kings, or at least the dukes of their own kingdoms. While it was a lot easier for the pioneers to accomplish their goals with state backing, the problem was that ultimate control would always rest with the officials and financiers from the Milky Way. This was not what the ambitious founders of Davut wanted to happen, so they all agreed to invest and develop their port system using their funding and resources. Their risky gamble succeeded, and they managed to present enough of an open atmosphere that Davut became known as one of the friendliest places to conduct trade and commerce in the Krakatoa Middle Zone. The situation was different at Pima Prime, and the Mech pilots needed to know that in order to avoid making any false assumptions. When the pioneers hailing from the Friday Coalition entered the Red Ocean, they adopted a united strategy that called for colonizing lots of star systems in the same space region. The result is a sizable concentration of settlements that are all close enough to conduct mutual trade. Pima Prime already serves as the linchpin of this trade. The Friday colonies is already large and extensive enough that it does not need to import a significant amount of raw resources or finished goods from external sources. This makes Pima Prime much more cohesive and less chaotic than Davut. The latter acted as more of a free port where anyone from any place could come and conduct trades. As long as the traders and visitors did not bring any outrageous contraband or possessed a history or breaking the rules, they were all welcome in Davut. Pima Prime, on the other hand, primarily existed to further the development of the Gage dynasty's colonies and lay the groundwork for its future dominance in the Friday colonies. External trade was not as necessary at the current stage and scale of colonial development in the Magyar Middle Zone. The frequent raids conducted by the Hexers made it a lot more dangerous to welcome foreigners in the Friday colonies. As such, the Friday men maintained a lot more vigilance towards foreign traffic. It was no surprise that a lot of trading fleets preferred to try their luck elsewhere. The relative dearth of foreign traffic made it a lot harder for spies and malcontents to slip inside Pima Prime. Fortunately, the Black Cats and the Hexer spy agencies knew the Friday men well enough to circumvent the strict security precautions. While Pima Prime is overly geared to servicing the domestic needs of the Friday colonies, there are just enough foreigners passing through the port system for us and the Hexers to insert at least a respectable amount of infiltration and saboteur teams. General Verl spoke. With the help of the intelligence leaks that we have obtained, these teams will play an important role in softening up the defenses and causing disarray among the opposition. I will explain the most relevant operations to us later. Just know that if everything goes right, the Gaugers will have to fend off attacks from within and without. This will make it much more difficult for them to maintain their composure. This was one of the ways the attackers intended to maximize their advantages. How could the Hexers not take advantage of all of the weaknesses exposed by the information package passed on by Tristan? In truth, the assassins and saboteurs did not even need to succeed in their efforts. As long as they diverted vital manpower and resources away from the main fight, and as long as they spread a lot of fear and confusion among the defending troops, they already contributed a lot to the operation. General Verl pointed at the different planets orbiting the star. As a sizable star system, Pima Prime boasts 8 terrestrial planets, 4 gas giants, and hundreds of moons. The Gaugers have only terraformed 2 terrestrial planets and one of the moons orbiting a gas giant thus far. Not only that, they also built dozens of space stations that orbit both settled and unsettled star systems. The military leader grinned. By the time our forces depart from this port system, I expect we will have trashed all these costly colonies and space stations. The economic damage from doing all of this was incalculable. It was already extremely costly for the Gage dynasty to send entire fleets filled with valuable resources and industrial machinery through the Bayonder Gate. It cost even more time, money, and effort to build up all of the mines, factories, and infrastructure needed to quickly ramp up local industries. While all of this would be worth it in the end, the premise was that the Gage dynasty was able to protect all of its infrastructure during this time. If a group of angry hexers barged into Pima Prime and happened to break all of this expensive stuff, then the Gage dynasty's colonial ambitions would be set back by several years. While the Gaugers had the money and the resources to make up for their material losses, it was a lot more difficult to regain all of the time they lost if their most important colony in the Magyar Middle Zone was razed to the ground. Plenty of competitors who owned and developed their port systems would quickly take off and create a permanent disparity that meant that Pima Prime would always trail behind. This was practically a death sentence to the Gage dynasty's desire to dominate the colonial state and become the undisputed hegemon of the Friday Coalition. General Verl emphasized this priority in no uncertain terms. This is our primary objective. Above all else, we must inflict as much material damage to Pima Prime's infrastructure. We don't necessarily need to defeat every defensive troop. If the enemy Mechs have lost their courage and wish to distance themselves from our forces, then they are free to do so. We will just go on and bombard all of their precious factories and other valuable structures into scrap. Mechs can easily be replaced, but the manufacturing complexes that pump them all out are much more difficult to rebuild. In other words, in order to set back a colonial state, it was better to wreck all of the boring infrastructure than to defeat entire Mech armies upfront. General Verl saw plenty of difficult and overwhelmed expressions from the Mech pilots who attended the special briefing. It was all well and good to talk about wrecking dozens of space stations and lots of different settlements that were spread across multiple different planets, but pulling it all off was much more difficult. Many Larkinsons had never participated in an operation of this scope, let alone fight in a battle that involved more than a handful of Mechs. Even the veterans who had taken part in battles that involved over 10,000 Mechs did not have the confidence to be able to strike at so many targets during a brief invasion. They needed to cover too many targets. This was bad because the Larkinson clan had always been at its strongest, when it was able to concentrate all of its Mech forces in a single location. While it was possible for every Mech legion and individual Mech company was able to spread out and complete different objectives, the Larkinson army simply didn't have enough training, experience, and institutional support to effectively complete such complex operations. It was impossible for General Verl to miss these truths, so he quickly made it clear that the Larkinsons held different responsibilities. The man waved his arm, causing a hypothetical invasion force to appear at the edge of the star system. Thousands of starships of different sizes and ship classes appeared in rapid succession. These were the carriers and support vessels that made up the Hex Federation and Golden Skull Alliance's massive invasion force. Once they arrived in the star system, they collectively headed towards the inner system, where the most valuable targets resided. That didn't mean they continued to gather in one gigantic formation. There were lots of secondary targets in the star system that could easily be taken out as long as the attackers spent a little effort. Soon enough, the sped-up simulation showed over a dozen different carrier squadrons splitting up from the main formation in order to head towards numerous different valuable sites in the outer system. As you can see, the Hex army is already prepared to send detachments to ruin all of the mining posts, military space stations, and other outlying strategic assets. As long as the leaked intelligence is still accurate and not too out of date, the Hexers should be able to bring just enough Mechs to guarantee success without drawing too much strength away. Once these detachments have completed their objectives, they will converge back to the main fleet and provide any aid as needed. This would take quite a bit of time, so thousands of Hexer Mechs would not be present in any opening battle. Make no mistake, soldiers, our time is limited, General Verl stated. A port system is much more valuable to a state than a regular star system. Ruining it will deal untold damage to the Gage dynasty. But the downside is that it is much easier for different elements of the sundered phalanx to reinforce Pima Prime. The longer we remain in the star system, the more Gauger Mechs will come to salvage a victory from this ruinous tragedy. The point he was trying to make was that, while the attackers might be able to overcome the initial opposition, the constant flow of reinforcements from the surrounding star systems made it increasingly more dangerous to linger in Pima Prime. We believe that it is highly unwise to stay in the port system for more than a week, the general continued. We do not necessarily fear the reinforcements dispatched by the Gage dynasty, but the longer the Hexers continue to violate the Friday colonies as a whole, the more it becomes unreasonable for the other coalition partners to stand by and do nothing. We expect the troops of the Kansu clan to move fairly quickly, while the ones belonging to the remaining 4 coalition partners will try to delay as long as possible. However, the Carnegies and the Vermeers and so on cannot pretend to procrastinate forever. The Carnegie Group, the Vermeer Group, the Vanguard Group, and the Puffer clan were all part of the same state as the Gage dynasty. As much as they had begun to compete against each other in different areas, they were still nominally comrades in arms. They were all obligated to dispatch reinforcements in the event one of their own got attacked. Perhaps the states might get away with delaying their troop movements for a day or two, but any longer than that would make their lack of action too unreasonable. The Friday coalition might fall apart directly as a result, and that was an outcome that none of the coalition partners wanted to see for the time being. This was not great news for the Larkinson Mech pilots. They needed to be able to get in, do their jobs, and get out before help from all over the Friday colonies arrived. There was no way to conduct a slow and patient siege that best reduced the risks and dangers as much as possible. The good news was that the Golden Skull Alliance wasn't expected to do much during this assault. The expeditionary fleet would remain close with the main fleet of the Hexer invasion force and continue to move towards the most important and critical planet in the star system. The Gaugers built 3 significant settlements in the port system. Pima Prime Roman 9C was a moon orbiting a gas giant that the Friday men converted into a gas processing complex and depot. Specialized gas mining vessels routinely skimmed the outer layers of the nearby gas giant in order to collect and filter out valuable substances. Once they filled up their cargo holds, the gas skimmers returned to Pima Prime Roman 9C, where they delivered the raw materials to the fuel production plants. A lot of Fridayman mechs and starships made use of the different fuels produced from Pima Prime Roman 9C. However, due to its outlying position, it was easy for the Hex army to destroy it, so General Verl did not waste his time on this part of the plan. He pointed towards one of the planets. There are 2 significant colonies in this star system. Pima Prime Roman 4 is the administrative hub of the port system. It also hosts a sizable military presence where numerous Mech divisions are situated. If possible, the Hex Federation will send a detachment to overrun it and raze it to the ground, but there is not that much infrastructure on this planet to merit much attention. The general turned towards another planet. The focus of Operation Saturday Market is centered around Pima Prime V. The 5th planet from the local star is where the Gage dynasty has decided to base most of its trade and industrial facilities. It is equivalent to Davut Roman 7, in a sense. If you imagine the planet where we have lived on for multiple years, then you will get a quick idea on what Pima Prime is like. Of course, the details are still different. A lot of Larkinson Mech pilots turned grave at the thought of invading a planet that was similar to Davut Roman 7. The degree of urban development was so great that the defenses were bound to be formidable. Let's talk about the orbital defenses first, General Verl said as the surroundings zoomed in to display a clear view of the layout of Pima Prime V. Once our main fleet approaches this orbital region, we will first have to go through Pima Prime Via and Pima Prime VB. The man pointed at the outer moon. Pima Prime VB serves as a convenient trading and logistical hub for inter-system trade. It is basically a drop-off point for bulk cargo that is meant to be shipped to another destination. The cargo deposited in the warehouses built across the surface of this moon are generally raw materials or processed materials that are mostly reserved for planetary construction. Most of it isn't valuable, so the moon's defenses are rather limited. Verl then pointed at the inner moon. Pima Prime Via is different. It has a considerable strategic value because it not only hosts a major military base, but also large manufacturing and assembly complexes dedicated to shipbuilding. While a lot of shipbuilding takes place in orbital dry docks, a significant amount of parts are produced and assembled on this moon for convenience and to achieve economies of scale. By our count, there are at least 24 moonside shipyards, many of which are responsible for constructing combat carriers and other sub-capital ships. The value of Pima Prime Via was great, though it did not host any of the really big shipyards that were capable of building capital ships. Crippling these shipyards would deal a devastating blow against the Gage dynasty's ability to project power. The problem is that the Gage dynasty knows extremely well how important it is to protect these shipbuilding facilities, so the main complexes are all located underground. Not only that, they are built adjacent to a major military base that not only possesses a formidable amount of defensive turrets, but is also covered by a Titan shield generator or city-grade shield generator. A Titan shield was basically the biggest and most formidable energy shield that could be formed by humanity. Derived from the same technology that allowed shield generators to protect massive battleships, every Titan shield generator was an incomparable, huge, expensive, and strategic defensive asset. They could not only protect an area spanning up to dozens of square kilometers, but also withstand an insane amount of punishment. If the Titan shields did not have to withstand an excessive amount of damage in a short amount of time, they could theoretically run continuously for many weeks. This was because their massive generators were extremely robust and supplied with an abundance of power. As long as the defenders hooked up enough power reactors to the generators, it would take way too long to exhaust the Titan shields over time. Every Mech pilot was already familiar with the properties of Titan shields. They even practiced a few siege scenarios where they were tasked with breaching different strategic sites that were covered by these massive shields. While it was fairly easy to overwhelm these Titan shields by pounding them with a lot of mechs, the enemy would never make it easy to accomplish this task. General Verl grimaced. While we can theoretically bypass Pima Prime VA, it is impossible for us to allow an enemy stronghold to remain intact at our rear. For better or worse, we must overrun Crosshair Base and demolish all of its hangar bays and turrets before our main invasion force can proceed. Naturally, the Hex army will take the lead. They have brought more than enough ranged mechs armed with kinetic or explosive armaments that can quickly and efficiently overwhelm Titan shields as long as they are able to do their jobs uninterrupted. That last word was extremely important. Tens of thousands of mechs showed up in the simulated scenario. The mech troops of the Sundered Phalanx did not appear to attack the main invasion fleet head-on. Instead, they did their best to maintain their distance, but harass the attacking force as much as possible. In our estimation, the Sundered Phalanx will not choose to make their stand so soon. The Gaugers will likely use Pima Prime Via and Crosshair Base as an opportunity to consume our resources. By letting the defenders of Crosshair Base take out as many Hexer mechs as possible, while also expending a lot of energy cells and ammunition, our main invasion force will enter the next phase of the operation with less strength than before. This wasn't pleasant news. Pima Prime Via may be important due to its shipbuilding facilities, but it was not worth the price of losing hundreds, if not thousands, of mechs. Venerable Joshua studied the different arrows and hypothetical movements and noticed an important detail. "Will we take action at this time, sir?" "No," the general shook his head. "The massive Hexer force should be able to handle this task by themselves. We should remain in reserve and save as much as our resources for the next phase of the operation. It is only after we have moved past Pima Prime Via that we will probably approach the main defensive line of the sundered phalanx. The real battle started from this point as far as the planners of Operation Saturday Market was concerned. The ultimate goal of this ambitious assault was to ruin the Gage dynasty's economic and industrial ambitions in the Red Ocean. It was for this reason that the Hexers wanted to ruin all of the buildup on Pima Prime V. They would never feel they had succeeded in this attack unless they directly turned all of the factories and cities of the busy trading planet into smoking ruins. The Gage dynasty wouldn't make it easy. The military planners and analysts all expected the Gaugers to make their stand just before the invading fleet reached the doorstep of Pima Prime V. Making a stand on the surface of the planet was unacceptable because the collateral damage of hundreds of thousands of Mechs exchanging fire or crashing into each other was too great.